Welcome to the LowCarbMD podcast. No one is beyond help. No one is beyond hope.
As we have always said, we are bringing you medical information and cutting-edge science, but none of this is medical advice. Please seek out input from your own doctor.
Hey everyone, welcome to the Low Carb MD podcast. We have this is a fun one, man. This is what I was like nervous about, and we had a lot of behind the scenes dialogue, and then we see a superstar here, and so it's really cool. So Patreon supporters, thanks for joining us live, and for everyone else, you have to wait for this to come out. But Tro, why don't you do the intros, man? We're outnumbered, by the way, dude.
Yeah, it's okay. That's all right.
And Layne's bigger than us, so
let's talk about what's going on here. And we saw an amazing anecdote on social media. We have here today Layne Norton. We have a health coach, David Mathas, who's an Army medic and is a master in exercise science and is a health coach. And we have a person who went through an amazing story. And even though I disagree with a lot of what Layne says, at the end of the day, results matter to me. I'm results driven. What worked? And he posted a picture of somebody who lost 285 pounds, and it just blew me away. For me, I care about, okay, what happened to this person? What led them there? How did they get out of it? And even if he used calorie counting, which I almost never use, or if he tracked or whatever he did, I want to hear about what worked, what didn't work. As much as I disagree with Layne on just about anything you can name in nutrition, there's still a story there that's worth telling.
Dude, I think you're going to find that you agree more on than you think. I think that's what's going to happen, dude.
No,
that's just my take on stuff. We'll see.
That could be the case. So today we have Randy Dadu. Did I pronounce it right, Randy?
Dadu, but I'm not gonna penalize you for that. Don't worry.
Okay. And Randy is actually, maybe we'll hire him soon. He's getting his PhD in psychology. Okay.
Masters first,
Masters, and then a PhD in psychology. And he has a quite an amazing story, which we're going to go into, that ultimately culminated in him losing 285 pounds. And along the way, he was helped by a gentleman who served in the Army. So thank you for that. Thank you for serving. And he has a master's in education science and is a health coach with, I guess, Layne, BioLayne, Dr. Layne's app. And
Team BioLayne.
Yeah, Team BioLayne app.
Yeah, so separate from the app.
This is okay.
This is kind of our higher level one-on-one coaching, more personalized. Yeah.
Yeah. So Layne, we're going to get to you, and we'll get to the intellectual debates in about an hour. But first, we want to hear from Randy. So Randy and David, it's nice to have you guys here. Randy, can you just walk us through? I mean, that picture is worth a million words. Somebody on a hospital bed, just looks like in need of help. And somebody who just looks like he could be a, personal trainer.
Oh, so I appreciate that. Thank you.
How did that start?
Yeah. So, okay. I guess I want to be as concise as possible, but us psychologists, we're not good at that. Right. So we're just going to, I try and be very concise, but so long story short, I was very, very obese all my life. Okay. We're talking like in high school, I'm like 350 pounds clean, right? Like, so it's, there's a certain genetic component, like, of course. And then I got up to 400 pounds. Remember, I lost weight twice and I gained it back. And the reason why I'm going to get into that, but I got up to 400 pounds the first time. That was just through not really binging. It's just, just through like, I guess, eating more than I, really should have. And, over time, oh my God, I'm 400 pounds. And then I lost 200 pounds. So I went from 400 to 200. This is the first time I lost weight. Now,
when was that? What year? So, how old were you when you were 400 pounds?
I was 400 pounds in 2014.
Okay,
Then
so about 7 years ago, 8 years ago, something
then
like that.
yes, sir. And then I lost it in 1 year. So very quick weight loss. Now, the method, right? Because the ends don't always justify the means, right? So the method at which I accomplished that journey was through extreme restrictive dieting, meaning that I did like less than 50 carbs. I would go out to eat. I would start crying because I can't eat with my girlfriend or with my family. Very depressing, very restrictive. And what the research shows about restrictive dieting is that as a way for us to maintain our freedom, we try to compensate by binging, because binging is a way of saying F restrictions, F diets. I want to be Randy. It's being taken away to me by this particular diet that I restricted myself from. So I binged as a way to maintain that drive for freedom, right? And
this was in 1 year, right? So 1
Yes.
year. So walk me through before that. I mean, you're in a household. I'm sure your parents are concerned about you, seeing
they were
you get
concerned.
up to 400 pounds. I was a 400-pound doctor, right? 350-pound doctor.
Oh, wow.
So I know the psychology of growing, and I grew up in a house where everybody was obese. Mom was obese, dad was obese. They've all since lost weight with restrictive dieting, but so they, I know what the psychology is like, and especially you mentioned something, the genes. They told me and my family that it was your genes, right? They said it's probably your genes. The doctors had said that to me all my life. So I want to understand, like, what's the mindset of Randy? There's picking, there's like bullying, there's stuff that happens when you're obese. So,
trust me. Yeah.
I mean, were you an athletic kid, like played football and stuff like that, or not really?
No, I was that very large kid that, so the image that you conjure up in your head when you think of like an obese kid, getting made fun of, like in school, like that stereotypical, like bullied kid, that was me.
That was my life.
Yes. Yeah. And I'm glad that we, have that in common, because, it's a struggle. I mean, it's a struggle to be bullied that badly. Girls wouldn't want to talk to me. It was so bad that if a girl dropped a pencil and I picked it up for her, she would say, "Ew, I'm going to go throw it away because the fat guy touched it." Right. Very, very, very bad. And that's why, like, now that I have veins, popping out of my shoulder, like it feels like really, really good. Cause, I just say, like, F all you guys, but that's a different story. I don't want to be resentful, remember? But it's like, yes, but look though, the fact that I even had that little segue of talking about the veins really sheds light on how much it affected me, and it still does, maybe.
Right.
So
and what did your family say? I mean, I'm sure they're seeing this happen to you, and kind of seeing you gain weight. And what are you thinking about this? I'm sure you tried something, and what are your thoughts before you lost that weight?
So, are you saying the first time or the second time?
Yeah, the first time. We didn't even get to the second time.
Yeah. No, the second time is even more of a story, to be honest. But the first time, I
mean, what made you want to lose weight? I mean, here you are, like, kind of getting picked, made fun of, and maybe family. Like, what made you change? What made you do this, crazy diet? I mean, to lose 200 pounds in a year is basically
ridiculous.
Not eating. You mentioned like under 50 grams of carbs. I mean, it sounds like it's under 500 calories, and that kind of, deprivation leads to all sorts of bad stuff. But what drove that?
Well, so what drove me to undertake such a rigorous process, I guess, was, I mean, I went to the doctor because, when you're that big, you have high blood. You're a doctor. You know all the type of stuff.
Yep.
I don't mean to go
high blood pressure. I had high blood pressure, pre-diabetes, sleep apnea.
And by the way, a sleep apnea 66 times an hour not breathing. The
the apnea hypopnea index. That's very high. So you were
and now
awake.
It's zero.
Yeah, that's amazing. You were awake, but you were actually were deprived of sleep. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's not a way to live.
So there it is. So the health concerns. Oh my God, I'm gonna die. My doctor said, I mean, I'm sure part of it was a strategy to try and scare me, but I'm sure part of it was substantiated. But he was saying, man, you're gonna die by the time you're 20, or by the time you're like whatever, like 30 or whatever, and then like I wanted to kind of live. And then I think part of it though had a very pernicious genesis. What I mean is that I wanted to get back at the people that insulted me, from being like obese all my life. And that chip on my shoulder kind of sort of like motivated me. But I actually think that maybe that like pernicious, resentful drive is not sustaining.
As a motivator.
It's not a sustaining force now. And then I'll talk about when I lost weight the second time, like with David, it was a more clean, because I have a fiance now. I want to live for my future kids whenever we have them, more pure. So, but that's a different story. But yeah, so
okay. So you're scared. Your doctor scares you. You want to do something about it. You're tired of being picked on. You're tired of all this crap. And you're like, I'm going to do something crazy. Now, where did you, how did you, we all kind of know about diet. We all kind of know about calories.
Yeah.
What did you do the first time?
Do you know the diet? Do you know the diet Ideal Protein?
Yeah. Yeah. Which is like 800 calories of protein a day and nothing else pretty much. Yeah.
Well, it was a little more than like, it was like 1,200 or 1,400, but yeah. So I did this diet. Okay. So, Jenny Craig, all this.
Yeah. Yeah. No, tell us what you did. I want to hear it.
Yeah. So, I did, Ideal Protein, which is like no carbs, obviously. I did, Jenny Craig, which, okay, whatever. Nutrisystem, all these diets.
Yeah, I bought those too, man. Those packages of meals that you end up eating.
And this was during that year period, or was this before you tried this?
Okay, so Jenny Craig and Nutrisystem before it didn't work. But then Ideal Protein worked. I lost 130 pounds from that. And then I just lost like residual, like 70 pounds, just kind of doing that, same thing like myself. But yeah, so that's how I did it. And then, it was so taxing on my mind, the restrictive part, which we'll get into.
Did you exercise?
I think that's really important. Was exercise a factor too?
Cardio only.
Okay.
No resistance training.
So basically, you're forcing yourself to eat almost nothing. And you're getting your protein needs maybe, and then not to bash Ideal Protein, but
it was the Biggest Loser diet, basically, right?
It was the Biggest Loser diet, and you exercised, and you're left with a mind that's ravenous and restricted, and you've done none of the work in terms of how do I go from somebody who's losing weight to maintaining weight loss. You've done none of that work. You kind of hit your goal, but there's a lot left undone. Right.
And work on the emotional aspects of all this stuff.
Yes.
Right?
You guys,
how does that unravel? Because we love the story. If you look at Breaking Bad, it's a story of how things unravel. So what happens next? Because now maybe you're getting attention.
Oh yeah.
Right?
Oh man, I have man. We need to have a full podcast on this. But yes.
Yeah.
Yes. No. I was getting like attention, which is
you're going
bad.
off to college, right? You're going off to college, right?
Yes.
So what happens next?
Now, by the way, that attention. Again, I'm getting into the, into Randy's little psychological speech here, but that attention started to become a problem, right? Because look, I'm 200 pounds now. I'm pretty lean, right? I'm not like as lean and muscular as I, am now after working like with David. But I was, like a pretty lean guy. And like everyone like in high school is tweeting like, what the hell happened to Randy, like the fame and the attention. Then, so that is what we call an extrinsic motivator, right?
Yeah.
Now, what the research shows about how extrinsic motivators can sometimes undermine our intrinsic motivation. That's called the over-justification effect. So meaning that I started to just want to keep going, keep dieting, get skinnier and skinnier and skinnier and skinnier because I wanted to keep getting that extrinsic feedback, which which undermined my intrinsic drive that started the journey to begin with, which was to be healthier, So I started to live according to the mercy of people, which then violates my autonomy, because I feel like I'm not even free anymore, because I'm just acting in a manner that's consistent with obtaining that reinforcement, like B.F. Skinner would say, from the people, that positive reinforcement. And that became too much, because I want to keep losing, because I thought more lose, meaning more praise.
Right.
That's not a linear relationship.
So then you became obsessed with this whole thing and get so focused and self-focused and all that.
So that means that Randy has to reduce carbs even more now. Randy has to be even more restrictive. Forget ideal protein. That's not enough. I need more, because that equates to more comments
results
on Facebook. Yes.
Yeah. And now your goal is not to say vanity, because sometimes vanity is fine too. I tell people, look, if you want to feel good in your jeans, that's fine, but it's away from your core principles, right? Which was health, happiness, and here you are. How does it fall apart? That's what I mean. That's
this is everything right here.
Yeah.
Okay, man. So I'm 200 pounds now, right? Let's just say I'm like 198 or whatever. And then I actually know the day. It was, well, I don't know. It was like July 15th or something. I think it was maybe, so this was like 2015. So this day, it's actually, you notice that my affect has changed, because this was a very emotional story for me now, what I'm about to explain to you. This was a day where I woke up and I realized that my efforts are not leading to performance. So I have no expectancy, right? Which is a key aspect of motivation. And I noticed that, yes, okay, I'm restricting more, going less carbs, doing some crazy stuff, and the scale is not going down. I'm not getting that extrinsic feedback that I'm doing a good job, Randy. So that day I said, you know what, F it. I'm going to restrict. I'm going to eat nothing. Therefore, so now you're talking psychological problems here. So I'm going to eat nothing. When I mean nothing, I mean zero. Today I'm going to fast. That's a better word. I'm going to fast all day today, because surely that's not true. Now I know. Surely if I fast, I will get that new low in weigh-in the next day. So I fasted all day. And of course, that night, my fiance and I, my girlfriend in the past, but not like my fiance, we and by the way, she saw my weight journey, a skinny and obese, and she loved me throughout. One of the best people ever. So
that's a huge deal. That's a huge point.
That's a big deal. That kind of support and emotional support.
Veins and biceps are 500 pounds. It doesn't matter to her. But it's okay. But regardless, she wanted to go to a country concert, and that means that, like there's fun foods there, alcohol. And look, I'm sitting there because I decided I want to fast in the morning. I'm all depressed and I'm all like, oh my God, what the heck? I can't eat. I wake up the next day and I actually gained a pound or something, probably to all the stress. And I said, are you?
Hormones matter. Stress hormones matter.
Yeah. So I said, are you effing serious? F this, F low carb, F Layne Norton, F David Mathas. I'm going to forget everyone. I'm going to be honest, like forget everything.
So now you went into
I know you guys have your own perspectives.
You're in psychology. You're in psychology. So you went into that. So you got so restrictive. The brain is getting hungry. You're you can't even live your life with the people that you love. And I'm personally just hearing your story. It sounds like fasting and low carb were just your vehicle for restriction. A lot of times we see people with anorexia just not eat anything. And, it's funny. We have people that come into our practice not eating for 2 weeks at a time, and they're still wildly overweight, right? It's not, fasting is not their issue, right? It's a mindset of perseverance. There's another thing going on that has nothing to do with fasting and hormones. And okay, but so here you are now, you're into all or none thinking.
Yes, sir.
Meaning like, I can't do this. I'm done. I quit. Right. And what happens next?
So I said, I quit. Now it's time for me to get my freedom back. That autonomy. Binging starts because the pleasure associated with binging is not the food. It's the freedom associated by saying F you to the food. That's the difference. I'm because the principle of diminishing return says that as quantity increases, pleasure decreases. So logically, I shouldn't be liking the 10th slice of pizza because the pleasure should start to turn to pain. My stomach now hurts. But I'm still eating, not because, oh my God, it tastes good. No, not, oh my God, freedom. F low carb, F all these people, It had a strong emotional origin. So I went to Wendy's, McDonald's, Burger King. I did restaurant hopping. That's how I started the binging process. That day I said, F it all. I haven't ate Taco Bell in a year. I haven't ate McDonald's in a year. Remember, evolutionary psychology, right? Very important, right? I put myself in that famine context by restrictive dieting. What did they do in the olden days? When they saw a woolly mammoth walk, it was a very rare sight. So that's why all the barbarians, all the ancient people, they went and killed that mammoth at one sitting and ate the whole thing because the next day they know the mammoth is not going to be there. I viewed McDonald's by restrictive dieting as my woolly mammoth. I didn't think it was going to be there. So that's why I wanted to binge on McDonald's because I'm like, oh my God, now the mammoth is here. I need to eat it. The real antidote to this problem was if I realized that McDonald's was there from the beginning, I wouldn't feel the need to seize the day and to binge on it because it's always there.
Yeah, and it's a survival instinct,
response,
right? You go, look, and plus, when you eat that kind of food, you get a rush from that food. So you feel good, right? Most people aren't binging on broccoli until they throw up. And I think that's an important distinction too, especially because you deprived yourself of that for all that time. You go, I was happier when I was eating that stuff.
Yes, I was. Yeah. And then, and look, so there you go. I ate. And then you said, okay, Randy, you seem like a pretty smart guy. I mean, you seem like you have a good head on your shoulders. Did you not have any self-awareness? So now you tell me that you have a fiance, or
wait, so you met your girlfriend, you're present at this time. You've already met that person, right?
Oh yeah. So she was there at 400, 200, 500, and now 198, which I am now.
Right. So now you start binging. You're going to McDonald's. You're doing all the high carb, high fat, high reward foods,
and I gained 300 pounds.
You're off. How long does that last? How quickly did you gain that?
1 year.
1 year.
Yes, sir.
So you're like that grizzly bear that's just destined to gain and lose weight,
Yeah. I gained 300 pounds. I gained 300 pounds in 1 year.
And you stopped working out and all that. Everything just went.
Of course.
Yeah.
Because So
how was your mental health during that year?
Well, I don't know. It was pretty good. I was so canola. No, I was was depressed. Okay, I'm gonna get a little bit personal. I could not wipe myself. You watched that a TLC show, My 600 Pound Life, right? That's
every
not
day in my clinic.
Yes, well there you go.
Every day in my clinic.
So I was that person. I could not wipe myself. I had to wear a seatbelt extender. If I went out to eat, with Layne Norton, let's just say, I would have to tell Layne, hey brother, we cannot eat in a booth. Can we get a table? Yep. And that's so embarrassing. If I went to David Mathas's house one day, if I was still obese, I say, hey brother, make sure that you don't have any wood chairs. Make sure the chairs are steel. That's intrusive. That's toxic to the mind, I call it. And I didn't want to leave the house, obviously, because I felt like now these kids won. They used to make fun of me. Oh, he gained the weight back. What happened? Right? So it's
brutal, man. It's brutal.
Yeah,
And
they call it, I mean, so you're a psychologist, so you know,
learned helplessness.
learned helplessness.
Yes.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And was your fiance during this time? Did she ever say, "Hey, Randy, dude, we got to tone it down a little bit," or she just loved you and said, "Okay, whatever you want to do, I'm cool with"?
No. She's not. She's not that agreeable. She's more like, she'll like tell me like what it is. But here's the thing, the more that just kind of added on to my binging behavior, because remember, there is a balance. There's a balance. There's the desire for freedom and the desire to belong, and your your tolerance for restriction. The more I get restricted by other people, Randy, you got to lose weight, you got to do this, you got to go on low carb. Then then it's like this. Then I need to increase the freedom to the other extreme to be able to kind of compensate. To be able
I just interviewed Dan Cadmus, and it was the same story. The more people got on, the more he got pressed. It's like the wife telling the husband, "You got to lose weight. What are you doing?" And they're on them, and they go, "It makes it whatever worse. I want, right?"
Yeah. So that's what motivated it. And then so there it is. I mean, I got up, I kept eating. Now I'm 500, or I'm 480.
How long ago was that?
I started with David Mathas at 480 pounds, August of 2019.
Okay, so I'm gonna kind of summarize here, and maybe you tell me what I missed. Sounds like somebody who had the ability to lose weight, was able to mentally restrict, was able to do what he was told, but got that weight loss, came with a series of external motivators, and the deviating from your kind of, your basic virtues, deviating from your basic kind of drives, led you to focus on things that you didn't intend on.
Amen.
And then you took it to an extreme. And it left you in a poor place of mental health. And you were basically a victim of the diet culture. You have to do this way. You have to do it more. And then it led you to feel excessively restricted, not knowing what to do. And you just fell back into all or none thinking, learned helplessness, poor mental health. And then, and
Troy, let me just jump in for a second, because there's one other thing from a psychology standpoint. Troy, we talked about the stats on this, and Layne may know better, but I think that the latest was like a 90% divorce rate after gastric bypass, right? Because these people who never had attention before all of a sudden get attention. Plus, they're restricted because they can't eat their cookies they want to eat and all this stuff. They can't eat their drug of choice. So was that an issue for you too, where you go, okay, I'm getting attention now?
Was there alcohol? What was going on?
Oh, no, I don't. No, I never been like a drinker. So you're saying, did that have any like permeating like effects on the other parts of my life? When you lost the weight,
you got down to 200. You're like, I'm all that now, and you start looking at yourself and looking good and feeling good. Then
I took. You guys know what Clenbuterol is?
Yeah.
I took that. I actually never told David Mathas this. How about this? I'm telling you for the first time. I took. I wanted to take steroids, whatever that means, whatever that was. I wanted to. I wanted to get better.
You were disregarding your health, and you're like, I just want to go back.
And I never did take steroids, but I did take Clenbuterol, and that made me, have like, all the side effects.
Agitation and
you guys are doctors. You guys know all this stuff. But yeah. So I had all the side effects, and but. It's really telling that I wanted to take such a crazy drug, intense drug that can have such side effects. It really sheds light on how powerful my motivation to keep going, to keep getting that, like BF Skinner said, I press the lever, I get the freaking food like a pigeon. My food was the Facebook likes. That was my likes. Boom, boom, boom. So my version of pressing the lever is restricting more and going to the gym crazy.
And the intrinsic motivation is
gone.
So
because
you know what? What I want to hear now is now when does the light bulb hit? And I want to turn to maybe
The
Mr.
positive
I want to
Mathas
hear
here.
David, man. I want to hear David. This guy
I
walks
wanna
in your
hear
office, and
David,
you're like, "Oh, dude."
Yeah, exactly. That's what I want to hear. So,
Dude, man.
all right, how do you meet? So when does a light bulb hit? You know, what causes you to again want to seek the weight loss, and then how do you see? You know, how did you find your health coach?
All right. So, okay, there was a positive side to that. Okay, everyone watching, it's not always so dark, and this is true. Like for life, you guys can do anything. If I want to say this little segue, if I can lose 200 pounds, gain 300, and then lose it all again, you guys can do anything you guys want. I know that that's a very cliche thing, but it's true. So, and by the way, I had bad genetics, so I was able to overcome that. So okay, a little segue. Sorry, but. Okay, so I'm sitting here at about, a 480. And so the main motivator was my fiance. She came up to me and she said, "Randy, okay, you don't want to lose weight for yourself, fine. But we plan on getting married. And by the way, we are this July, we're getting married."
Congrats, man.
Congrats.
Thank you. Thank you guys. I appreciate it. And then but she said, "Okay, we plan on getting married, like if God grants us kids, like we want to have kids. What I don't want to be a widow." Whoa. So now you're talking, whoa. I don't
my wife said to me.
Tro's wife said the same
My
thing.
wife
Yeah.
said this when I was the 350 pounds board certified doctor, top of my class, chief resident. She's
Yeah, you
like,
were
"You're
killing
gonna
it."
die."
But man,
Yeah.
if I was
Die.
married to Tro, I'd say, well, widow can't be that bad. But I don't know.
I love it.
Okay, so
But
she cares about you. She wakes you up.
Yes, and guess what? So, again, as you guys can see, I love psychology a lot. So I used it, I use this, I fixated on that. I created an image in my head of me in a casket at a funeral and my future kids, however they look like, crying right in front of it. And I said, okay, vision, that is very scary vision. Let's not go there. Every morning from that, I woke up and I said, I woke up and I conjured that image in my head, me in that casket. I'm like, okay, to kind of move somewhere, you don't like always need a place that you want to go. You also want a place that you do not want to go. That's two things pushing you forward, pushing you and pulling you. That was, I was trying to get that. So net benefit is forward. So I just kept thinking, okay, I'm going to die. I mean, especially now I'm 500. It's not like a 400 now. Like now I have, you guys know what neuralgia paresthetica is? The thigh burning.
The nerves.
Yes. Yeah. I had that, pre-diabetes, high blood pressure, I had it all. I had the whole myriad of problems that's associated with weight loss and depression and stuff. And then I said, okay, it's done. That's done. Randy, you're a 4.0 student. I'm not saying that to brag. I was telling myself, you're very intelligent. You know how to talk well. You seem to be extremely conscientious, like 99 percentile from, a personality test. How is this? This is not, there's not a fit among your behaviors.
And people look at you that way and they assume this guy's dumb. He's lazy. He's a slob.
Yes.
All he does is watch TV. He doesn't work out. And
it's the opposite.
So that's a brutal thing too, right?
Yeah. And like Troy just said, I was like the top of my class, but people tend to work harder on their jobs than on themselves. That's a pure quote right there.
Yeah.
Because but then I said, okay, why don't I work harder on
We've
myself?
literally said that on our podcast.
Yeah, I love
literally
it.
said that on our podcast about 10 times. They'll take better care of their dogs. They'll take better care of their cars,
Family,
better care of their
kids, all
money.
that. Yeah.
And they won't put their health first. They don't want to be selfish, but they need to be.
And the worst of us docs, we're the worst at that, by the way. So
and I was bad at it too. So then I said, you know what? Like, it's done. I need to lose weight. But okay, now the next question: how to these two individuals at the bottom here? I am going to start to use my psychology now. Also, I had a therapist. I sought out a binge. I had to say that because this is actually probably like the
that's
biggest
huge,
thing.
man.
I had a binge eating therapist, Dr. Howard Farkas, and his perspective is all on what I just said. Moderation, flexible dieting, binging is a response to restriction. Binging is not the cause of the problem, but merely the effect. So if you eliminate the cause, which is restriction, then the effect, as follows, goes away, And we worked through that. We really hashed that out. And I said, okay, I have a decent understanding of the psychology. Let's scan social media. What a beautiful place sometimes, I guess, to say what people preach flexible dieting. Meaning that you don't got to go 5 carbs. You don't have to go 1,000 carbs, but you don't have to go 5 carbs. What people preach. And then I saw Dr. Layne Norton over here. And I'm like, okay, this guy, a PhD, I like science, and he obviously likes science. He talks about it like enough, which is awesome. And then I said, okay, let me scan, his team, right? So I liked his approach of flexible dieting. I read the book, Fat Loss Forever, very good book. I watched Jordan Syatt, who's, I think Layne, you know who that is, right? Yeah. And then, and Paul Ravella, all these people that are all about flexible dieting. Then I said, okay, I really like Layne's team. Let me go scan the coaches, and let me pick the one that I think best fits my wants and needs. And it was David Mathas, due to our shared history of, he was, he had the anorexia problem, right? The exact opposite of the binge, but the same source. Again, anorexia, binging, they manifest differently. Big guy, very, very, very skinny guy. But no. Let's get beyond the ostensible and start to look at the restriction. And then I said, oh my God.
Who's had both.
Yeah.
I
guess I had both too. Yeah. I can away. But yeah. And I said, hey, I like David. We have that, shared similarity. I saw some of his stuff, his like responses to some of the Instagram Q&As, and I liked him a lot. And to be honest, I was more comfortable with like a guy. I'm just gonna be honest with like a guy coach. So that's why that also motivated it. And I reached out to him. Okay. And but the main motivator was Layne Norton's Team BioLayne's overall mission statement. I don't know if they have mission statement, but I'm sure they do. Their mission statement.
We do.
There you go. But here's the thing. I don't even have to know their mission statement for me to tell you what it is, because you can see it. And that's a true mission statement because they live it out of, a flexible approach, evidence-based, Then I reached out and,
awesome. So David, man, let's hear your stuff, man. I want to hear. So this guy walks in or calls you, and then
one last quick question. Okay. So
here's Layne's.
There's a nice
mission statement, man. You got to read that out loud, man, because I can't.
Later on.
I'm old, dude. Okay, later on we'll get it, man.
One last question for Randy, because we're gonna have
Layne's ripping his house apart for us, man. This is cool.
So I'm just curious, because Brian, I'm gonna ask you, Randy, if you came into my office, somebody who failed at low carb dieting, right? Failed at low carb dieting. Brian, what do you think? You think you'd be quick to put him back on low carb dieting and fasting when he basically said to you his life was miserable eating that way?
Yeah, no, I would have a different approach. I would have a different approach. Go, okay, what works for you? There's a lot of people go, look, I cannot live without ice cream. Okay, let's work around that, right? There's different approaches, because I agree to an extent. And really, I think for me, the patients I see who fail are the ones who go, oh my gosh, I can't give up this, I can't give up that, I can't. And other people go, like, what can I eat? Like, there's a different mindset of that. It's like, what works for that? If you love Italian food, can we do it in a way where you're not having gelato and all this other stuff with it? Can we moderate that? And I think that will be an important topic to talk to Layne about, is that. I was like, some people, like I have patients, she goes, look, I cannot moderate. If I have 1 drink, I have 10 drinks. So that's a person where flexibility may not work, and that's what we see. Other people go, yeah, I can have a tortilla every once in a while, and I do fine. Or, as long as you're not doing it every single day for 8,000.
Sounds like
for a second. I think what people miss is that there's always going to be some form of restriction required, but you get to pick the form. And so I think what people are missing is that when people say, like, this diet worked for me or this diet didn't work for me, what they may not understand is that what actually probably clicked for them was not some physiological outcome, but more so it just felt easy to them. And I hear that with low carb. Like I hear, plenty of people, like when people say, well, low carb doesn't work. No, of course it does. For certain people, it absolutely works because it feels easy to them. I mean, Tro's an example of that. And then there's other people, like you said, there's people who say, if I have one thing, I have a bunch. But there's other people who say, well, like Randy, they say, well, if you take that away, if I have to take it away, now I have the exact opposite effect. In the literature, they call it a disinhibition reflex. So I think individualization in that context is really talked past in the nutritional industry because people just look at it and they go, well, you're just talking about adherence. Who cares about that? That's because it's not sexy. But that's the most important thing. Now I'll butt out and let Randy keep telling his story.
Yeah, no, I agree though. I think there's a lot of truth to all this. I think that's why I think we have more common ground than different ground because you really have to look at that person in front of you and go, what's going to work? And just one point, just for Layne, so I've been telling Tro, I know you don't know this because you don't listen to the podcast. I'm like, Tro, look, Layne is generally seeing a lot of different protoplasm. We're seeing the end stage diabetics who have foot ulcers and they're going blind and their kidneys are failing. It's different than this young 22-year-old who wants to get more muscle or wants to, and so those guys can get away with weight. And I'm telling you, I could tell you story after story about people who carb load like crazy and they do fine because they have so much muscle mass that it's all steering towards the muscle and they're burning it off for 2 hours a day. But when they're married with kids and they're an engineer and they can't go out and work out anymore, then they get messed up later possibly. But I think there's a lot to say about the restrictive, because really I would say the problem, to answer your question, Tro, is when you are so restrictive, and this is the same thing we see on like people who do liquid diets and they lose a bunch of weight. So I've had guys come to me, lose 50 pounds. They go, I just can't take it anymore. I'm losing my mind. I can't do this. And they do a more low carb approach and they put muscle mass on and they start feeling great and their energy is getting better. Because I think that's where Layne, we're totally going to agree. The more muscle mass, the better you do.
Yeah. Just one point I'd leave it. First off, Randy's, I'm listening to your story. David has told me about it several times, and obviously we've talked via message, but it sounds so similar to Ethan Suplee. It is, I don't know if you've heard his story, but it sounds so similar.
I never heard of him.
And gained it, lost it, gained it, lost it. And very similar, kind of mentality, you know what I mean? And Brian, you brought up a good point, and I think one of the reasons people like Tro and I tend to go at each other a little bit is we're both guilty of a little bit of selection bias. And what I mean by that is people who come to Tro probably have already kind of bought into the low carb in terms of they definitely want to try it, right? People who come to me or us are going to say, we have no.
I want flexible dieting.
We have people who come to us who say, man, I tried low carb, I couldn't stick to it. Flexible dieting seems easier for me. So I think we're both probably guilty, and I try to always think about an echo chamber, but we're both probably guilty of being a little bit in that echo chamber. And again, we'll get into it later, but.
And to your point, Layne, and to your point is this, look, when we see clinical success doing what we're doing, you see clinical success doing what you're doing, you go, look, it's working for me. And we say it's working for us. So that's why we have to learn from each other. And who I want to learn from is David, who pulled off this miracle, man, how you did this, because this is a huge thing because Randy needed someone to get him on the right track. And Randy, to the big thing that I hear in your story that I get excited about is like, you sought help. Most guys don't seek help. They're like, I'm not going to see a counselor. I'm not going to go to a trainer. I'll do it on my own.
Mental health.
So I think it's that's a huge deal because that's a huge component of the mental health part of this. And physiology is a huge part of your story too. Yeah. So with David, man, this guy walks in your office, you look at him and you go, uh-oh, this is going to be brutal.
Well, unfortunately, we haven't got to meet in person yet, but we've done everything via online and everything.
Well, that's a point in itself, right?
We've actually developed quite a hell of a friendship over this past year and a half. And I was actually going to go to his wedding, but I have my firstborn child, my little daughter's going to be born in July, so I'm not going to be able to make it up to his wedding, unfortunately. But
congrats, man!
Thank you.
I have two of them.
Good. Excellent. The big thing with Randy was, you mentioned it. He came to me in a spot knowing that he needed a change, right? So there was that aspect of not having to fight him like you do with some clients, right? Like he didn't know necessarily what needed to be done, but he knew something needed to be done. So right there as a coach, I'm like, okay, this is great. Randy's issue a lot was from the psychological component, which, you know, he talked about and everything. So what I like to do with coaching is, and I have to make a slight correction. I don't have a master's in educational science. It's exercise science. So I'm not like,
did I say education? I meant exercise. Sorry.
I know. I just didn't want people to think I'm some like second grade teacher up here giving nutritional advice or anything like that. So I actually have quite a bit of experience in this, but no, it's a minor slip up. So what I like to do is I like to take the science, I like to take the research, and I like to take where the individual is. We kind of come together, right? Layne and I and Team BioLayne, we're not dogmatic about anything. I mean, you guys, I'm glad you guys kind of talked about that a little bit before I jumped on here. We're not anti-low carb. We're not anti-keto. We're not any of that. We're more pro finding what works for you. And with Randy, low carb didn't work for him. So why are we going to be insane and keep trying that, right? Not that people are insane for doing low carb, but for him, it was
He already failed it. He already failed it. He's walking into your office. You know, I had somebody literally this week walk into my office, said, I want to lose weight with fasting. I just did a 14-day fast. And I'm like, well, and I've done them in the past, you know, and I'm like, wait a second, you're wildly overweight, you're obese, you have medical issues, you're able to fast. Fasting's not your problem. Eating's your problem, right? Not fasting. You can fast. You showed me that. You did it again and again, right? So in case of Randy,
we don't have a weight loss issue in this country. We have a weight sustainability issue.
Bingo, exactly.
Yeah,
so you see Randy, you're like, Randy, you can lose weight, but I'm sure you're thinking, how do I keep this guy going forever?
Well, actually, no. And that's what we did with Randy was we didn't look at the long-term picture, right? We broke it down into small, achievable goals. So we took it like 50 pounds at a time. And at 480, you know, losing 50 pounds if you get the mentality straight and you get the calories correct and you get the exercise and all that, that's really not that difficult, right? When you're obese, it's a lot easier to lose it's easier to lose weight quicker than you are someone who's in a normal BMI, right? So with him we started focusing on more of taking the science and where he's at and combining the two and starting from there and making small yet achievable goals, all right? One of the things when Randy came to me is I said, this is only going to work if you pair this with a therapist, right? Which he had already just started doing. So that aspect of it was crucial. It wouldn't have worked. I could have got a lot of weight off of him a lot quicker, but he wouldn't have sustained it. And we've already seen that. So it was a combination of nutritional intervention, exercise intervention, and that mental.
That's massive.
That's huge. So with Randy,
totally.
I mean, he started, and you know, I have my own history with it. So it's something that is near and dear to my heart. With Randy, you know, he was at like 5,000 plus calories. Okay. So what we did is we didn't drop down to like 2,000 calories right away. We came down to like 4,000, right? Let's come down to 4,000. Let's start working on some of these things. He mentioned, you know, he couldn't go and have pizza without having 10 slices, right? Well, okay, let's work on having 7 slices instead. Let's just work on that. Let's not come down to 2 slices yet. Let's go to 7. Let's see how you feel at that. Little by little, we come down to 5, 3, 2, so on and so forth. And we did that with many different aspects of, you know, his food, his exercise. He mentioned earlier, you know, he lost it all before because of cardio. Like he just did a bunch of cardio. He didn't weight train. So we started implementing a very balanced weight training protocol along with cardio, not an excessive amount of cardio, a very healthy amount of cardio.
How much was that? So it sounds like he was doing like an hour a day probably before. Is that right? Probably an hour a day or more?
Yeah. I mean, like now I'm doing like much more. Actually, I'm going to the gym like right after like I leave you guys. But yeah, I would say
no,
like
your first time around, an hour a day.
The first time? No, I went a psycho cardio. I went 2 times a day, Stairmaster, anything you want up, anything. Okay. Yeah.
So not sustainable. So you seeing this, David, how do you switch that to go from, you know, cardio every day, twice a day? How are you, I mean, especially with your exercise background, what are you thinking here?
Well, so when he did come to me after he put the weight back on, obviously he said earlier, he just said, F it. He wasn't doing anything. Right. So we just started implementing just a little bit. I think if I had to think back, it was probably maybe like 100 minutes a week, something like that. Just like a very balanced approach, right? Nothing outrageous. And that's how I kind of program my cardio. I don't kind of do it by day. I do it by week so that people have the flexibility, not only with their nutrition, but with their training. So adding that element of flexibility in with training as well as nutrition, I think really kind of spoke to Randy. So he didn't feel so much pressure. I think that when you're weighing that much, you have all this pressure that you put on yourself, maybe family members or friends to hurry up and lose a bunch of weight. And I told him, listen, we're not going to lose weight fast. We're going to target a little bit more than a percent body weight per loss or body weight loss per week because you're obese, right? So we can safely do that. But we would constantly be in contact, and we would see like, okay, is he still losing at a good rate? So on and so forth. Do we need to maybe decrease calories? And for the longest time, I mean, I don't think we got under 3,500 calories for probably 9 months, 8 months, maybe 9 months.
Yeah,
And
no,
it was just go ahead, Renee.
No. Yeah, no, I was going to say that. All I was going to say is that, yeah, we did not slash calories because of the metabolic adaptation problem. Because like I had so much to lose, it would suck to be adapted to 2,000 calories at 420. So.
Right.
Yeah,
it's the same process.
What kind of mindset that led you to.
And if someone's blood pressure is running 200, now you're going to drop them to 120. They're going to feel like garbage. You got to slowly bring it down, And I think that's a great approach. And the constant contact of saying, hey, I'm in your corner. Let's go. Let's do this. That's really critical too.
And that's where weekly, I mean, for a while we were doing like monthly and bi-monthly, like phone consults and stuff, but then it got more frequent. And we do weekly check-ins and we text all the time. Like I said, he's a friend now. He's not just a client. But with Randy, it wouldn't have done us any good. And this is how I kind of approach it with all my clients is that, listen, what good is it going to do to get you the weight off if you don't learn how to sustain it along the way? So that's where we were starting to talk a lot about the mental aspect, right? How do you view food? How are you thinking about going into this meal, right? And, kind of with the same thing at the beginning where we took science and where he's at and did that, we found a starting point, and it was somewhere that was achievable for him. And it was very important for me that he see that he can get success quite often. So we set those small little benchmarks along the way for him to hit. Along the way, he gained more confidence. When certain situations would come up, say like holidays, right? So holidays were a huge issue for Randy. He would not be able to control himself. So we worked on certain different strategies, techniques. We worked on different things he could implement on that day to try to relieve the pressure from himself and not let his emotion take over to where then he couldn't control his food intake. So, Randy is a very fit individual. He's got a good frame on him. You said something to Layne earlier, you get away with stuff when you have muscle, right? I kind of equate it to celebrities. Hollywood celebrities can get away with anything because they have money. Well, when you have more muscle on your body, you tend to be able to get away with a little bit more stuff, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So with Randy,
Monsters, Pop-Tarts.
So with Randy, I thought it was really important that he understand that by implementing resistance training, maybe you're not going to burn as many calories during that session. And we had to kind of let go of that emotional response to that endorphin rush that you get when you do cardio, right? So I started explaining to him and showing him how weight training is going to change his physique more drastically than cardio, right? Because as we cut down, you have more muscle, have a higher metabolic rate, you have more to show for it when you get down there, right? So he fell in love with the endorphin rush from weight training more than obsessing and overdoing cardio.
Now, I think that's huge, man. I think that is a huge thing that we're trying to, and for me too, like struggling with, I was working on the treadmill. I was doing the same thing and it wasn't working. I was gaining weight. I'm like, this is ridiculous. I mean, 6 times a day doing. So that idea of weight training, because I was thinking, I don't want to lift weights because I don't want to get bigger. I'm trying to get smaller. But my buddy is like, you got to get bigger before you get smaller type thing, right? You have to realize the benefits. And we're seeing that physiologically what happens with weight training. It's a huge deal.
Absolutely. I mean, it's going to help you burn more calories at rest. You're going to have, all that stuff. But with Randy, I think it was really important for him to understand that he has control over his body. He has control over his actions. Not getting into my story, but I had a severe eating disorder that I nearly died from. I was anorexic. I was in the ICU. I nearly died. It was a control issue. So I recognized that in Randy. Okay. My issues is what propelled me to go back and get my master's and to help people. Right. So it's the same concept. So I recognized a lot of myself in Randy. So I knew the signs to look for. I knew when he was maybe getting a little bit too stressed. I knew when maybe we were pushing it maybe a little too fast and we needed to slow down to where he was comfortable with. Because if you don't find a rate that's comfortable and sustainable for your client, they're never going to succeed, right? So it doesn't matter about how fast we get to the end point. It matters about that we get there and that you learn along the way. I mean, listen, I'm not going to be able to coach Randy for 5 or 10 more years. I get that, right? But he is going to be in a position for the rest of his life now to handle the skills, not just the life skills, but the emotional skills that he's developed along the way. He's going to be able to handle that for the rest of his life. And that is what we at Team BioLayne really, that's part of our mission statement, is to help you develop skills to extend the rest of your life. And once Randy grabbed a hold of that, I really think that, along with simultaneously working with the therapist, because I would tell Randy something to do, and he would, at the beginning, and he would be very hesitant, and he would talk to his therapist, and the therapist is like, he's right, do it. And that kind of reinforcement gave him more confidence. And then seeing the results gave him more confidence as well. And that's, success breeds success, right? So once you get, it doesn't matter how little of success it is that you achieve, it breeds more success as you keep going forward.
Yeah, and I think, go ahead.
Brian, real quick, because I know a little bit of backstory, if it's okay, if I could jump in.
Oh, absolutely.
Well, actually, we were gonna segue pretty soon, so let's try to wrap it up in the next couple minutes. But yeah, go ahead.
I think this is really crucial for a lot of people who struggle with losing a lot of weight. Obviously, there was going to be setbacks somewhere, and I know I just read a systematic review that one of the major challenges that people who have to lose a lot of weight face, and nobody really talks about this, is daily weight fluctuations. That those are big demotivators.
Huge deal.
Yeah.
How did you guys?
Citro. That's what I've been telling Tro.
How did you guys overcome that? Like, what did you do to help keep him on track so they didn't? Because what happened before, he just went, oh, fuck it, right? So, David, how did you implement strategies to keep him from doing that? And Randy, how did that click?
Yeah, so good point. So, and it's even something that now to this day that he has a better grasp on, but he would, like you said, he would have a weight fluctuation. And I think, Randy, you mentioned this earlier, then you just said, F it, you went off the next day, right? What I told him was, the first time it happened, he let me know right away, which was great. You know, he was scared, he was nervous, all that stuff. I said, will you do me a favor? Will you just humor me? For the next 4 days, will you just get right back on track with your macros, right? Will you just hit them as close as you can? And we didn't really do macros. We did protein and overall calories to begin with. So it took a little bit of pressure off him as well. Eventually, we got down to more specific macros once he felt comfortable. But I said, just hit your protein, hit your water, hit your overall calories. Just give me 4 days. Let's talk again in 4 days. Let me know what happens. And I'm sure he was a nervous effing wreck during that whole time. But you know what happened? His weight came back down. And that was one small step in that confidence building, that he knows a day of overeating or maybe higher sodium or all this stuff is not going to ruin his progress, right? Now, I want to say that right after that, he was completely fine the rest of the time, but he wasn't. It took multiple times of that happening for him to gain the confidence. And that's why it's really important that coaches are in contact with their clients, that they see them through the long haul, because like we don't do 30-day, we don't do monthly coaching, right? Our lowest packages are 3 months. And the reason for that is because we don't want to lead people onto the expectation that they're going to see drastic results in a month and then not be able to sustain it. We're in this for the long haul. And with Randy, it just took multiple exposures like that, and for him to gain trust in me, and then everything just took off from there.
Yeah, those are huge things. I think tempering expectations, because I know Layne is looking at these guys going, look, I went keto, I lost 50 pounds in a month, or that, and people have this expectation, especially postmenopausal women. Forget it, ain't gonna happen, right? Yeah. So I think when you temper expectations, you go, look, there might be bumps in the road, but we're gonna stay with it. And I think Tro and I have the advantage. We use continuous glucose monitors. We can see if someone's starting to go off the rails. And like you say, the critical thing I think is, someone goes off the, and I've seen it several times, they go off the rails one night, boom, they're back the next day. But if they go off the rails one night, they go, oh, I'm a terrible person. And they say, I'm a failure, like kind of what happened with
all or none thinking. Yeah.
It's like all or none thinking. It's like, I can't do this and I'm done. And then they lose. And I have a lady I just saw, same thing.
All the time. One bad day is not going to ruin you. But if you let that one bad day turn into 2 or 3 or 4.
No, that's huge. Huge.
And I want to mention one thing about how that worked for me. So me, I am a data analyst. That's my thing. Data. It was interesting how I can look at a data in the literature. So like Layne, I'm always scavenging the literature. So I'm able to understand it. But when it comes to my own life, I freak out over the fluctuations on the scale. Again, disconnect between private and professional life. And then when I weigh myself every day, that's a good thing, by the way, not a bad thing, because I start to see the bigger picture. Because when you do yourself, okay, only weigh yourself like once every 2 weeks, you actually have more anxiety because, oh my God, Monday's the day. Oh my God, Monday, which cortisol, and we know what cortisol does to weight fluctuation, So if I see every day, I get a bigger picture of the movie. If I send Layne a movie, a snapshot, he was like, what the hell is this movie about? But if I give him a lot of snapshots of the movie, now he know what the movie's about.
Yeah, and I think that's why we have conflict on Twitter, because we're giving each other a little snapshot. We can't say, hey, look, here's how I see it. Here's the overall approach we're going to do. Because everything you're saying is reasonable.
I know you guys got to move on to Layne here pretty soon, but I just want to touch on that last part real quick. And the reason why you'll never see us do like 30-day challenges, right? Like fat loss challenges. We do 16-week lifestyle remodels. And we phrase that like that for an exact reason, because the mentality portion of this is everything. If you can't get it right up here, the external stuff is not going to follow. So we don't do 30-day fat loss challenges. We do 16-week diet and lifestyle remodel, because some people just need to work on a little bit of the emotional and mental side of it. The rest of it will come afterwards, right? It's not just all about losing the weight. And with Randy really, really hammering in the mental and emotional approach to food and how you view it, it has been a game changer for him.
Yeah, and I always use Randy, what you were saying about the movie, I always use the example of the stock market, right? If you're investing and you're looking at day-to-day fluctuations in the market, you're going to lose your ass, right? Because when it hits a low, that's you having a high weigh-in fluctuation. Your stock hit a low, sell, panic, right? But if you look at the market, you say, well, there's no 10-year period where the stock market hasn't made money. And I know if I keep investing smart and do that over time, I'm going to have returns. And you kind of say, okay, well, it went down today, but, I'm just going to back off and, just let it do its thing and come back up. And I find that comparison for clients tends to be kind of helpful as well.
100%.
Yeah. Take a breath and relax, because what I find is the people who are the most stressed about losing weight and that's their focus have the hardest time. Like they're weighing themselves every day and they're like stressed out. I get a quarter of an ounce. I fasted and I gained weight. Well, you worked out too, and you're retaining some fluid. Your muscles relax. Take a breath. And so I think that's a huge part of it, is saying, okay, look, we're looking at the overall journey. You're not doing a modeling career tomorrow. You're not, let's start like looking at it long term. And I think that's really critical. And what I love that you did too is you broke it down into short goals rather than saying, okay, we're gonna get 300 pounds off you. Like that's overwhelming. How do you strive? A guy who lost 200 pounds one step at a time. Step at a time.
Listen, I don't want to give anybody false expectations, right? I didn't know if we could lose 300 pounds. Like I knew we could based on the strategies that I want to implement, but is he going to be receptive of it? And that's something you don't know at the beginning. So I'm not going to tell any client. I actually tell all my clients, I don't promise you anything except that I'm going to look out for your health first and foremost. We're going to work on the physical, mental, and emotional aspect of it. And we're going to take things at a sustainable pace to where you can learn lifestyle habits along the way. And then the results come from there. So
yeah, you may not be able to do all that you can find out, but you should be able to find out all that you can do. I think
absolutely.
I think that's
and
key.
one of the things here that I just want to kind of wrap up and talk about, because we've touched upon this and it's something near and dear to me. Now I know that David, you've had anorexia, I've had anorexia. I know that you, Randy, you've had binge eating, I've had binge eating. And so I've really gone into the literature on eating disorders, and it's really important that people know this, because when you look at the literature, and we did a case series in our practice where we took people with binge eating and gave them a ketogenic diet. And it actually, and the way we implemented, maybe you guys can appreciate it, even though we don't agree on the principle. We said, look, if you want chocolate, we'll get you chocolate, right? It'll be low carb, okay? And it'll have sweetener in it. You want pizza? We'll get you pizza. It'll be low carb. We'll show you how to make it. We'll show you where to buy it from. So we did not restrict the person's food preference. We actually catered to the food preference so that did not feel restricted. And we measured what happened in terms of their outcome. We measured their Yale Food Addiction Scale, their binge eating scale, and it improved almost literally 95+% their symptoms. So, and this is in the setting of a highly monitored program, right? So no part of me, and if you look at the literature in terms of what prevents anorexia in high risk, like adolescent women, it's actually the Healthy Weights program. I don't know if you know anything about Healthy Weights program. They reduce thin idealization, fat shaming, the thin culture, and they focus in on healthy eating. So actually they're restricting processed food within the diet. So my question to you is, do you think it's restriction per se, or do you think it's the mindset? My thesis is that it's the thin idealization, the pressure to lose weight in combination with the fact that people don't know how to flexibly eat, whether you're flexibly eating within a low carb realm, flexibly eating on holidays, or creating a system to be able to enjoy your life and live. So do you think it's low carb causes eating disorders, or do you think it's, you know, some of these other factors may be an issue? And I'll leave it to both Randy and David, and then we'll head out to Layne.
Randy, do you want to go? You can go
start. So it's not that low carb causes it. It's that, so I think flexible dieting has a bad connotation because of like the 10,000 calorie challenges and all this crazy stuff that you see in social
media. Twinkie diet.
It's just that everything is on the menu. It doesn't mean that you have to eat everything on the menu, but giving people the flexibility. So the meal. Okay, Alexa, I didn't say your name. See, she's listening to me.
Oh, she's listening to us all, man.
So the mediating variable, right? The mediator, what is the missing link from point A to point B, is that the flexible dieting gives people the option, the freedom. You don't need to feel guilty for eating pizza. Then if I don't feel guilty,
the guilt and shame,
yeah,
huge.
And I'm telling you, we have to return to our evolutionary context. When you put yourself in a famine mindset, meaning that this is restricted from me, I'm going to want to seize the day and to binge on it to regain my autonomy. So,
yeah.
So so you telling me that I have to, if I want to do low carb on my own volition, again, mediating variable, my own volition, autonomy, that's good. That's okay. You know, if I told David, hey man, I don't like carbs, I like fats actually, I don't know, can I do a flexible dieting approach around low carbs? He'll be like, yeah. He wouldn't say, but yeah, that's what it is. It's just that the freedom for me to make the choice. I want to do this. Huge. That is the thing.
Yeah, that's a huge thing, because, you know, people come to me and they're like, well, I can never have bread again. It's like, if your aunt makes, they go, what do you do? And I go, look, I don't eat bread. I don't eat like store-bought bread. I just don't. It's out of my diet.
That's your choice.
Well, it's my choice. But if I go to the best restaurant in the world and they have this best sourdough that I enjoy, it's always an option. And the last several times I've gone, I go, yeah, I don't really want it. So it's not really willpower. It's like, yeah, I really don't want it. I don't feel great when I eat a donut, for instance, so I just don't. It's not a temptation. And I'm like, oh, I got to use willpower. And I don't want it, right?
I think that's huge. And I think that, you know, the mentality thing, I'm not against low carb at all. Like, I think it's the most sustainable for most people? No, I don't. But if it is sustainable for you and you truly do feel like it's sustainable and it's your choice, not that the food has control over you, I'm totally fine with it. But I think that the majority of eating disorders, I think that they are mental. I mean, they are a control thing. I wrote a book last year on all my experiences. It's on Amazon. It's called A Shell of Myself. I talk about how, you know, mental health, obsessive compulsive disorder, anxiety, depression, the eating disorder, all this stuff manifests, and it all takes a hold of you. So if you're choosing, and you can be honest with yourself, and you're choosing a way to eat that you feel you are in control of, you can sustain, it works for you, 100% go for it, 100%. If you have any doubt in your mind that the food is controlling your actions, you have an issue that needs to be addressed.
Yep, so I 100% agree. On that note, Layne, let's
15
dismiss.
seconds.
No, you're gonna say it right
has
now.
His hand up and everything. Look at that, bro.
He's been so good. Listen, David, thank you for coming on.
Yeah,
Randy,
thank you guys. Thanks, Randy. Thanks for coming on, man.
Thank you for sharing your story. This is going to inspire people.
It was
both
nice
of
to meet you guys.
I really appreciate it. You know, sharing your story and bearing your heart out is not easy. So we appreciate that. And Layne, this is all you now.
We'd love to do a follow-up with you guys too, by the way.
Oh yeah, and yes, that'll be good. we're actually reverse dieting phase right now. So and that's,
yeah, you don't see his reverse dieting information. It's crazy.
Yeah, I'm eating 3,500 calories a day right now and still losing weight. So it's nice.
Awesome.
Right.
Have a good
That's
one,
awesome,
guys.
man.
Appreciate it.
I'm
Thank
jealous.
you guys.
That's cool.
Thanks, Randy. Nice meeting you, buddy.
Thanks, guys.
All right, so go ahead. You got the floor. We'll start with you, Layne.
Oh no, the only thing I wanted to add was in context of eating disorders, we interviewed one of the leading researchers in the world on this topic, Dr. Layne Norton from Deakin University in Australia. And one of the things he said that I thought was really, really poignant is he said that, no particular diet causes eating disorders. That's not how it works. But
I agree with that.
One of the big causes is when you create hard food rules that cannot be broken. So in the context of, say, flexible dieting, let's take that for example. I'll start with that. If I say, okay, these are my macros and I have to hit these, I have to nail them, and then I'm a little bit off, I can have the exact same disinhibition response of binge eating if that's my hard rule. Whereas if I say, you know what, I'm going to choose, like I'm hungrier today, I'm going to choose to go over these, and I understand that that's a choice and that's okay, and I'm okay with that choice. That's okay. By the same token, like if somebody's low carb and they say, I'm never eating purposeful carbohydrates again in terms of like starchy carbohydrates or whatever it is, if they create that rule in their mind, if they violate that at all, that can also cause this. So I think what's the main takeaway I took from what Dr. Layne Norton said was just be very careful about creating hard food rules. Have food guidelines, but do not trap yourself into really hard food rules. And that's what
The mindset. So I think we agree completely.
Well,
It's the mindset.
I don't know
is the
that I
key
necessarily
here.
agree completely, because here's why I
Why?
say it. If I'm an alcoholic, I don't tell my alcoholic patients, hey, you know what, have a drink of it, be flexible with alcohol, because they can't control their alcohol. And we have people, and I'll tell you, I have patient after patient tell me, if I have one cookie, I'll have 100 cookies. Once I have it, I can't freaking stop. Rob Sivas, who's a good friend of mine, same thing, low carb. But this is before he was low carb. He would have chocolate and he would just eat the whole 5 pounds of M&Ms. Like that was his addiction, right? So I think part of it is, how do you have, I think getting that mindset of how flexible, how can we be zealot, can not be a zealot, but some people go, if I have one, I can't stop. And other people, like they have a piece of pizza and I go, did you enjoy it? Hell yeah, I enjoyed it. Okay, cool. Right.
Can I address that, Brian?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So I think one of the struggles is, first off, like I can appreciate the parallel between an alcoholic and somebody who is having food dependence with like hyperpalatable foods. That being said, so I'm not an expert on alcoholism, but from what I understand from experts is recently they kind of have backed off the idea that if you're an alcoholic, you can never have a drink again, that actually may be counterproductive for some individuals. However, I think based on what I've read, and again, if there are people out there who are experts in this and want to correct me, I'm 100% open to that. But maybe they need to start there with training wheels. Maybe they need to withdraw it. But then actually Randy never even got into it and David never got into it, but they did what was called exposure therapy, right? So maybe you are, and for people who don't know, like, for example, if you have a fear of spiders, right? How you cure that fear of spiders is not to, never be around a spider, because that's not reasonable. And you don't cure it by walking into a room that's filled with spiders, because that's just going to be traumatic, right? Yeah. And that's, that'd be the comparable would be binge eating, right? That's traumatic. But maybe what you do is you walk into a room and you have a spider that's inside a case that can't get you, and you just sit there for 5 minutes, right? And then, gradually you move it closer to you, et cetera, et cetera. And then at one point you take the case off, and then, you progressively build it. And interestingly, actually totally separate topic, but pain is kind of that way as well, that you can actually like desensitize yourself to pain if we're talking about chronic pain, not an acute injury. But so that kind of would be my reply to that, is that may be a step in the process, so that like maybe that does need to be cut out in the short term, so that somebody can just get a handle on things. But maybe over time, and again, everybody's an individual, so I'm not saying this needs to be the case for everyone, but maybe then over time that person can deal with exposure therapy so that they have some increased flexibility. But again, I'm one of these people that like everything's on the table, right? Like I'm married to somebody who's talked about like my wife had a binge eating disorder that she struggled with for many, many years. And she had to do basically exposure therapy as well. So it's very difficult. And I think that I'm really glad you guys brought this up, because I think that this is actually one of the major hurdles in terms of people losing weight, because they get so frustrated and just go into what we call fuck it mode.
Yeah, I think that's true. I think,
hold on. What role do you think the hyperpalatable food plays? Because, you know, I've yet to see somebody have a limitation issue on, you know, Brian, you made this comment, broccoli or, you know, lean steak or something like that. Nobody, eggs, even eggs. I have yet to find somebody who just continuously binges eggs, where if you step away, not that I think natural food is great or anything like that, you know, but if you move into hyperpalatable food, that's, you know, the addiction is there. It's so there's some pattern, you know, I don't know if we know it exactly. Is it a carb fat combination? Is it the flavors? Is it the ability, the speed at which we can eat the food? But there seems to be something with the modern hyperpalatable food, right? I mean, Kevin Hall's studies showed that, right? You process the food, the independent of calories, you're going to eat more. So, I mean,
or almonds that are flavored, you're gonna eat more than just raw almonds. Like, it's not exciting.
I've seen you rail against, you know, and I get it. Like, there's a lot of nutritional dogma out with plant-based proponents, but I have a fondness for plant-based proponents because it's a real food. Not that it's an end-all, be-all. You have to do it, right? And I have a fondness for real food, low-carb eating. You know, not that you have to do it, but there's some signal there, right? Versus the modern food. And I want to get your thoughts on, okay, do you think, yeah, the mindset of food addiction and binge eating is one side, but what do you think the food has to play with this, if at all?
Yeah, great. So I think this is one of our major points of what is perceived as contention online. And I actually think we're going to be closer on this than you think. So because the literature doesn't categorize it as food addiction, I call it food dependence, which is what the literature kind of categorizes it as. And we can argue if there's subtle differences there or not. However, I agree with you that you typically do not see people binging on, you know, whatever you want to call it, whole foods, minimally processed foods.
Maybe the exception of nuts. You know, nuts and cheese.
You know, tuna out of the can.
Nuts and cheese are real foods that people binge on. But
yeah, I mean, you could argue that cheese is processed, but I have seen some people who struggle with like cheeses and that sort of thing. And people don't really binge on oil, but like if you listen to Ethan Suplee's story, like he would say, like, you know, I would have salad, I'd have huge salads, but I would just dump oil on it, you know, that sort of thing.
They got eggs, bacon, ranch dressing, blue cheese, and then they're putting olive oil on it. Yeah.
So I think there definitely is something there in terms of, you know, and also I think one of the things that people really struggle with, and I hear this a lot, people think when I talk about energy balance or calories or whatever, what they hear is obesity is your fault because you're eating too much. And I don't believe that obesity is 100% the fault of the individual. That was my belief system 20 years ago when I was a young bodybuilder and didn't understand, that sort of stuff. But I mean, we know that obese people have a much higher reward response to food than a lean person. Like, that matters. We know that people who are obese are more likely to have trauma early in their life. I think there was a study done of 100 women who were obese and found that like 60 of them had some form of sexual assault in their past, right? So this shit matters. That stuff all matters. And so when I'm saying that, usually when I'm talking about calories, I'm doing that in response to people kind of saying, well, this doesn't matter, or it's all this, or it's all that. And I'm like, okay, I acknowledge that these other things matter, but let's not also live in fantasy land where energy intake doesn't matter either, right? So, and I think that's where the two sides are missing, because, you know, the sides tend to straw man each other, and it's always.
Let's talk about it. I think that's a huge.
I think that's.
Let's go into energy intake specifically.
Yeah, let me finish my thought on this real quick, Joe, and then
go ahead.
I'll let you have at it. I think the one thing I would say about hyperpalatable foods, and I do agree that I think it's much easier to overeat those, to binge on those, but I think there might be a little bit of correlation versus causation. What I mean by that is, if we're trying to get people to lose weight, what are the things we usually put the hard food rules on? It's not whole foods typically, right? It's hyperpalatable foods. Now, I've heard from some vegans previously who like would try to restrict, meat and whatnot, and would have that disinhibition reflex if they actually had some. They just end up kind of blowing out on that. So we do see a little bit of that, but not nearly as much. And I don't think that they're the same, all things being equal. I think that it definitely is much easier to binge on hyperpalatable food. I guess what I would say is that we should be aiming for people to eat less of those because they're so energy dense and because it's easy to overeat on. But I just want people to be very careful about how we talk about them, because if we put in people's minds, this is bad, you should never ever have it, then we create the situation where we actually might see the opposite effect and people start binge eating on it.
Right. I want to focus in on this for a second, because I think this is going to be super important. And there's work I think Kevin Hall's working on and showing how low fat versus low carb diets may have different downstream effects on dopamine signaling, and that's yet to be published. I know it's going to be published soon. So there's a lot of research coming in on this particular field. But let's talk about energy intake, because one of the things that the ADA guidelines right now, for example, say, which I have a big contention with right off the bat, I'm going to say that they still believe that weight loss is critical for glycemia, which and that energy intake is what matters. They acknowledge healthy dieting patterns. By the way, plant-based, paleo, and low carb are all there as patterns of eating that they recommend. But they say ultimately weight loss matters. And I know that you believe this too, because you recently made a tweet that I had a hard time with. And you're not the only one. There's other people like Dr. Nicola Guess who've said, if you look at the long-term studies, the A1C reduction is probably predicated on weight loss. Okay, and I think this is an area that I think it's harmful for my patients, because we have the data in front of us and now we're publishing it. We just submitted it actually today, a case series, where it has almost nothing to do in severe diabetics with no weight loss, with minimal weight loss, less than 5%, maybe on average 6 pounds of weight loss. We demonstrated an A1C reduction of 6 points coming off of insulin and metformin. So they didn't lose weight. So I want to talk about this because this is a key point where we're going to disagree. And I want to know exactly what you mean that,
well, let me clarify that too, Tro, because let me clarify that a little bit, because I think they're wrong on weight loss, right? Because if Layne gets a hold of someone who puts on 20 pounds of muscle mass, they'll have a net gain of weight, but they're going to get their A1C better and their insulin is going to get better, because it's the visceral fat that is the key, I think, to all this stuff, because that's going to lower your insulin level, and vice versa. I think that's what we're seeing. And I think that's why Layne has such success, is if you could put on skeletal muscle mass, visceral fat and skeletal muscle are enemies. You put on more muscle mass, you attack that muscle is releasing interleukin-6 to break down visceral fat. So the more muscle mass you have, I think you get away with more. So I think that's
well, they mean point. Fat mass.
But they're wrong. It's not fat mass, because if you have subcutaneous fat, it's totally different than
I have a semi-emergency.
Visceral fat.
Can you one
second? Oh yeah, no problem.
Yeah,
Tro
we'll
and I will
go chat
argue
a little bit. So I think the key question here, Brian, is like, how much does weight loss matter? How much does weight loss matter?
I'm saying, look, if you put on 10
I don't think it matters at all.
Yeah, if you put on 10 pounds of muscle mass and your weight doesn't change, are you metabolically healthy or not?
Right. Yeah.
You will be.
Yeah, absolutely. So
because by definition, you're decreasing visceral fat. That's where people are missing the boat.
They also mean energy intake. Just so you know, they're also talking about, if you look at the ADA guidelines for medical nutrition therapy, they mean total energy intake. So they're talking about calories basically, and they're talking about weight loss. And I just, Layne isn't the only one who said that. Very esteemed researchers, Dr. Nicola Guess, Stefan Guillenet, they've constantly said energy intake.
Are you good, Layne?
And weight loss is key. You got to go, or
sorry, we had an outlet catch fire in our office, so I think we're okay.
Okay.
Yeah, we called the fire department, so I may have to step out here shortly.
Yeah, no problem, man. Yeah, no problem.
I will, if it's okay, I'll go ahead and address.
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah, sure.
I didn't hear everything you said. Now, Tro, I just want to bring back to one point. You said you were going to publish something and you said there was no weight loss, but I think you said there was a little bit of
5
weight
pounds
loss.
of weight loss.
Right?
Yeah, there was about 7 pounds of weight loss, which was under 5%. You know, it's like 3% of their body weight. Insignificant, clinically insignificant weight loss.
Okay, so this is one of the problems with Twitter, is you only get, a certain amount of characters, and that's not an excuse for getting stuff, not giving proper context. So let me allow myself to give proper context. And I will say I put up a 8 minutes worth of video clarifying my statements and saying where I was wrong. So I wasn't aware of Dr. Hall's research when I made that. Now, what I will say, and we saw this because I come from a lab that was like semi-low carb, like Layne's lab, where I'm from, Illinois. We weren't like keto, but we were like relatively low carb is what we did a lot of our research on. What you tend to see is if you do low carb, you see improvements in HbA1c faster. And you may see some with minimal weight loss. In fact, the research shows that like in the first, like the initial weight loss seems actually extremely powerful for improving glycemia, like even on a moderately low carb diet, like we're talking 30% of calories from carbohydrate. Layman, my advisor, did a 16-month study in women and I believe they were pre-diabetic, and in 3 weeks they were no longer pre-diabetic. So those blood markers resolve themselves relatively quickly from like lifestyle intervention and that initial weight loss. And it looks like if you want to get that a little bit faster, you do get that a little bit faster with low carbohydrate diets. Now, where I want to provide context is if you look out at 2 years, right, in these studies, the meta-analyses, you don't see a difference between low fat and low carb. And I know what the rebuttal is going to be is, well, people stop adhering. Well, 100%, absolutely right, absolutely right. So but we do know that low fat will also improve HbA1c. We know that if people lose weight, it will improve HbA1c. So my perspective on that data specifically is, once again, my base of what I try to form a diet for an individual around is, okay, what do they consistently adhere to best? If that's low carb, fabulous. If that's lower fat, fabulous. If it's more balanced approach, fabulous. Intermittent fasting, great. Whatever allows them to maximize their dietary adherence in the long term is what we're going to use, because at the end, the vast majority, sorry, fire department's here.
That's all right. Look, so
we set you up, Layne, man. We set you up, dude. We got
let's we called them.
But to address that, just let me address that very quickly, Tro. Initial weight loss by whatever mechanism, whether it's Weight Watchers, whether it's liquid fast, I don't care what it is, you're losing visceral fat first. That's what this and ketogenic diet may even make it quicker. So I've had people lose 1.8 pounds. One of my guys, 78 years old, loses 1.8 pounds and reverses diabetes of 1.8 pounds. That's not because he lost a massive amount of subcutaneous fat. He's losing visceral fat, liver fat, So I think that's an important point. And again, it ties back to what you're seeing, Layne, is you put more muscle mass on, it's depleting the visceral fat too. And we're going to get better glycemic control. Tro, you know as well as I do, if we have people who can't make good insulin, I've laid her insulin is 1.5, which we would say is great, but her A1C is 6.2. So how's she going to overcome that? She has to get more insulin sensitive. How's she going to do that? Put muscle mass on.
Yeah, I mean, like from an anecdotal perspective, Holly and my wife and I had our liver fat done, like a year ago, I think it was. And I was actually at like my heavier. So I was like 230 pounds. Now I'm like 205. And for me,
I weigh less than Layne. I'm going to take that as a win for me. All right, no, go ahead.
For me, they said, you have they're like, we almost couldn't detect your liver fat. And for my wife, they said, we can't detect your liver fat. And my wife is extremely muscular for a female. So again, that's just two people, but I would agree. And listen, this is one of the things I struggle with. And again, this is selection bias, of course. A lot of the low carb people I hear from, or I will say people who are more dogmatic with low carb, will say, well, you know, I don't know if maybe this is just me where it's coming from, but they kind of dismiss exercise a little bit as a methodology for, you know, losing weight. And what I want to really emphasize to those listening is, especially resistance training, that is your most powerful tool to improve your health. If you did nothing else other than resistance train, you will have better lean body mass, better bone mineral density, better insulin sensitivity, your blood markers will improve, and you don't have to lose any weight to get that. So, like I said this on the Rogan podcast, like I think we spend so much time arguing over like different dietary interventions, which we should be figuring out how to get people to lift some stuff. You know what I mean? But yeah, at the end of the day, like I don't think Tro and I are that far apart, especially based on our last long debate we did. I think people disagree in the margins. You know what I mean?
Yeah, so that's the parts we should focus on. You know, when you get too smart. So this is, you know, this is the big thing here. I think we can all agree. We all agree, get more lean mass. I would never tell anybody don't lift weights.
Yeah, I think that was what I agree with Layne too. That's what the keto community was missing. When I first started doing low carb, you know, a couple of years ago, 3 years ago now, no one talked about exercise. Ben Bakikio walks in and goes, guys, you're missing half the boat, a big part of the boat. Because sustainability, like we all agree on sustainability, if you put more muscle mass, it's more sustainable. That's why we all have the stories of people who did a liquid diet and they lose 100 pounds, like Paulo. Lose 100 pounds, you gain back 100 pounds. If you lose 200 pounds, you gain back 210 pounds. Because you lose your muscle mass in this process. And we want the microwave culture, and you want it to, I want to lose 30 pounds this week. What do I got to do? It's like, well, you're not going to lose 30 pounds of fat this week. It ain't going to happen. Especially if you're putting muscle mass. So I think that's the big thing we're seeing is when, you know, Sean O'Mara, who we had on, you know, showing decreased visceral fat, increased skeletal muscle mass, right? They're inhibitory.
Well, yeah, and muscle, like from an energetics perspective, is extremely, I mean, this is like in our lab, we kept pushing for people to define skeletal muscle as an organ, which because it is. And it's extremely greedy from an energetics perspective. And, you know, if you have more skeletal muscle, you're fluxing things through the bloodstream much quicker, because muscle is going to be the greediest tissue other than liver and heart. And
type 2B muscle fibers, right, that are super greedy, insulin sensitivity.
Yeah. So, you know, I think it's one of those things that, like, I actually disagree with Tro in that we should focus on the margins, because I think what happens a lot is people get really confused by focusing on the margins. I think the big picture message is much more important. And yeah, of course we disagree on some stuff, and that's fine. But when it's like, you know, we're arguing over these things that are really, at the end of the day, don't really matter that much. If people are getting, you know, like I tell people, I'm like,
well, I want to clarify that. So my whole, you know, I come off very aggressively. I've said things to you that maybe a professional person shouldn't say, and I wish I could express myself more professionally. I'm sure you feel the same way.
Just don't call me a liar when I get something wrong. And
don't call my friends.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, look, I think we all kind of get into that.
Hold on. Look, but the thing is one of the biggest things that I forget about, you called me this, I called you that. Maybe I shouldn't have said liar. You're absolutely right. My parents wouldn't be proud of those types of words. So you're right. There's nothing wrong with what you're saying, right? But what I care about is the patients I have in here, brittle diabetics who are adhering to a low carb diet, and then they see a headline, and this wasn't from you, this was from Dr. Nicola Guest, that said it's predicated on weight loss. And wait a second, they're like, wait, I gotta lose weight. I even had somebody with a low body weight, he's 15% body weight, and he's able to make his A1C 6.5. It's like, no, he needs to hear there is an effect from carbohydrate restriction that is separate from weight loss. And it is harmful to some of our patients 2 years down the line. You know, the literature shows 2 years down the line, it doesn't matter. Everybody's A1C looks the same, right? I agree. But if you take those people and put them back on a low carb diet, their A1C was going to come down. I mean, we see it. People go off the rails, their A1C goes up, and they come back and they start dieting, their A1C comes down. So it looks like you got to go.
Hey, Troy, we got to let the Patreon in too, because he's got he's got a hard out, so I want to make sure everyone gets their questions. I know Nick wanted to join us, and
yeah, guys, I'm sorry, they're gonna shut our breakers down.
Dude.
That's all right, man. That's all right.
Come on, Layne, you're gonna use that excuse
This was
again,
fun.
man.
We'll do it. We'll do
Hey,
it.
Matt, hey, Layne, thanks for joining us.
This is me ducking. I had to start a fire and call the fire department.
Yeah, man. Hey,
We
thanks
can
for
do it
joining us. You
again.
guys were great. We really enjoyed having you on, and we'll continue the conversation. I really appreciate.
Perfect.
I appreciate
thank
where
you, guys.
we
Have
can
a good day.
find common ground.
All right.
Awesome, man.
Awesome.
Get the fire taken care of. We'll give you a pass on this one.
Okay, sounds good.
All right,
Take
brother.
care.
Take care.
Well, you know what? While we have
So let's
some time,
bring in-
then,
Let's bring in Nick.
Yeah, let's bring in Nick.
We'll get
and maybe
Nick's
we can talk
rebuttal.
with him. Nick, we were just about to bring you in, but we had to cut things short, I guess.
Yeah, we got.
You know,
He set a fire just to get. He was
Dr.
afraid of
Nick.
you. He set a fire
That-
to dodge you.
That was a pretty legitimate excuse. I'll give him that one. I know that.
Yeah.
So I think I'm trying to get some light here. Sorry, I'm in a weird
Hey,
construction.
everyone! This is Nick Norwood. You get a bonus guest here. He's
You guys got a
little
bonus guest.
Harvard
He's a-
kid. That's pretty
you guys
smart.
just saw him on the
We like to have
podcast.
him on. Yeah.
Yeah, I
Life's
think
best
that
medicine and hit this one.
Let's get your thoughts, Nick.
Brian is the most level-headed between probably me, you, Tro, and
Yeah.
Layne. I think that we all can get a little bit pokey on Twitter. So me and Layne have had some back and forth. So I've wanted to.
And we've had a little back and forth too, but I'm like, I was kind of defending Jason Fung and go, look, dude, this
Yeah.
guy's helped a lot of people. You just don't understand what he's saying. Cause I think we get so caught up in this calories in, calories out. And this is the big
Yes.
argument. And it's like, yes, every single patient I see has been told calories in, calories out.
Yeah.
So the problem is, how do you do that? That's
Yeah.
the hard part. Otherwise we'd all be thin.
And so here's where I have a little dissonance with at least the way Layne communicates on Twitter, and he's a very different person on these videos. I watched your last lecture with or the last debate with David Feldman, which was great. He's super respectful, and here he was as well. But it's the concept of like we're all on board. You, both of you, and Layne, that like whatever works for the individual works. I don't care what the RCTs say. If it works in your N equals 1 life, then like I don't care. Like it works for you. You can tell everybody else to shut up. The issue is the idea that the low carb ketogenic community is telling people you have to do this. I think where the frustration comes, and a little bit of evangelism, if you want to call it that, but it's really just frustrated concern that this is not given to patients as an option. It's not that, we're saying you have to do this. It's like, this is something that metabolically speaking, and we can delve into the metabolism, is a great option. You should consider it and consider trying it. And people aren't told that. I almost basically died because I wasn't even given it as an option.
And it's unique. See, that's the thing, is that each pattern is a different effect. It very clearly, I mean, you can talk about this, Nick, but what do you see in the literature when you look at low carb versus low fat diets? There are unique effects between each approach.
100%. There are, and there are definitely independent metabolic benefits, at least in most individuals, because we have a metabolically unhealthy population, of restricting carbohydrates. So I think nobody's saying carbohydrates as a macronutrient are poison. What we're saying is we have a metabolically unhealthy population, 88, 90% metabolically unhealthy, and restricting carbohydrates can improve that, from the high data. That's isocaloric, same protein. Layne would say protein is very important. And restricting carbohydrates, but not restricting fat, improves metabolic syndrome in 9 out of 16 versus 1 out of 16. And one other thing I want to
talking about reducing triglycerides,
but you also have
right?
You have to understand, Layne's not looking at all
energy
that.
independent.
I know.
He's not looking at that. He's looking at weight loss. He's looking at muscle mass. So he's looking at we're looking at markers of if I drop we work together, your A1C or insulin drops from 58 to 4, which just happened with one of my patients. Heck yeah, I feel good about that, right? With 12 pounds of weight loss, by the way. But the point is they're metabolically healthy and they are way far away from getting diabetes now. If you're 58, it's a matter of time, right?
Yeah. I think that's so critical to talk about metabolic health, not weight loss, because weight loss, I would basically this is a strong statement and a little bit of hyperbole, but throw it out the window. It's like, it's a downstream effect of metabolic health, however you want to get there. And you can improve your metabolic health on a low fat diet. I think it's a little bit orthogonal. Like you're going in the right general 180 degrees.
Yeah.
For just given human biology, but the metabolic health aspect is huge. And where I wanted relate that to as I was listening was mental illnesses, because of course mental illnesses have a psychological aspect, and Ryan's story was amazing, and like kudos for him for overcoming that and you know those mental obstacles. But we do mental illness patients a huge disservice when we don't acknowledge that mental illnesses, just like diabetes or metabolic syndrome or obesity, they're metabolic diseases. The same core pathologies, insulin resistance, oxidative stress, inflammation, which can happen independent of your weight, are central to mental illnesses, which is why there are now data, case series, and clinical trials showing that ketogenic diets are effective treatments for many mental illnesses. So last year, there was a case series, 3 patients by Carmen et al., showing that ketogenic diets were effective in binge eating disorder. So we're talking about binge eating disorder and restrictive diets being bad.
True. Yeah. And yeah, all those things. And also we're seeing it, we were seeing it clinically. We were treating diabetes and metabolic disease and obesity. And everyone says, oh, I feel calm. Oh, I'm not drinking like I used to. Yeah. Oh, I feel like exercising more. Not because they're trying to lose weight, because they just feel energetic and they feel better. And we see that clinically. And so, and it is like Layne said, selection bias. Why people seek Tro and me out, because they're like, look, I just got diagnosed with diabetes. I'm scared, whatever, out of my, pants. Because now I have a, you give me and Tro knows this, you give me a newly diagnosed diabetic and we will absolutely crush it. You just went on insulin, we will crush it with you. If you've been on for 40 years, it's going to be a little bit more challenging, right? There's no doubt about that. Yeah. But you have a motivated patient who wants to make a change, man, we will crush it. And we have a selection bias for sure, because no one's going to pay us if they're not invested. Like, why would you do that? It's a waste of money.
You have to give patients the credit to be like, you can do this. It's a self-fulfilling prophecy. If you say low carbs not sustainable, then you put people in an environment where they're surrounded by ultra-processed foods and sugar, and you've already told them it's not sustainable. Of course they're going to fail. And if you actually look at conditions where people are given support, and that's the issue where people aren't, it's sustainable. You look at the Virta trial, the 2-year trial, it took people, it was like baseline average 8 years of diabetes. And the adherence rate was statistically the same as just standard of care. You go talk to your endocrinologist and get basic advice. I think it was a 74% adherence over 2 years.
People want to adhere.
Group
they want
versus
to.
78%. Yeah, they
want to know that it's working.
So
they have to see results, and they have to look at the right markers. That's why I think if we're looking just at weight, we're looking at the wrong marker. Like for the short term. Long term, I agree with you, because you're going to see if someone goes off the rails. But short term, we're looking at insulin, sugar levels, waist circumference. There's nothing more important, right? That's what we're seeing clinically. So I've had, like the guy I told you guys about, that I've been harping about. He lost 50 pounds doing a starvation diet basically, and then he loses 10 pounds, but he lost more inches off his waist in those 10 pounds than he did the first 50. And he's lost more inches off his waist. He's put on a ton of muscle mass. So his chances of going back, the reason people gain their weight back is they lose muscle mass, and it's a survival instinct, just like Randy was saying, right? But the other thing is, the important thing that they're doing is David had close follow-up. He goes, hey, I'm in your corner. I got your back. And that's what we're doing too. And that's why we need health coaches and constant follow-up, because if someone goes off the rails, they go off the rails. Like the standard of care right now with diabetes management, Tro, you know this. We see you down. It's like, okay, we'll see you in 3 months. Good luck. Here's what you do. Cut your carbs.
That doesn't work.
It doesn't work.
It
just doesn't work. And that's why they go, it doesn't work.
They need support. They need mental health. They need texting. They need people need to constant feedback. Absolutely, Brian. This is it. We need to be. And the problem is the doctors haven't taken responsibility.
But they don't have time, Tro. They got 8 minutes. They can't do this. How are you going to talk low carb and keto to people in 8 minutes?
Yeah, but the next step is to take responsibility. And I'm so glad, Dr. Norwitz is going to see this, really manifest the use of the CGMs, the scales, the ketone meters, all of these things remotely, engaging with people online, getting a community feel. All of these things are so critical, because that is how we're going to move the population to health. It's not with here's buy my 18-week juice fast and see you in a year. You know what I mean? It's not meals and shake replacements, and I'll see you in a year. It's not that. Virta is a $2 billion company because they show that if you walk patients through and you're responsible for their outcomes, that you'll be able to achieve something great. And I think that we as doctors, all 3 of us, we have to aspire to do that. Now, this approach that Layne had, it may work for some people, young people willing to exercise. Clearly, he lost weight. He could do it, but at the end of the day, we're responsible for their medical outcomes. You know, if they fail our programs, they're getting unhealthy.
Well, plus Randy did a lot of self-searching and figure out, okay, what's my motivation?
Absolutely.
What am I doing? He did a lot of work on himself. You can't just say eat this and everything's gonna be great. That's why it's so critical that we have the support. Yeah, we like I'll give you credit for this again. Family support, stress level, like lack of family support, increased stress. That's when people go off the rails.
You know what? If you actually bring in, so if you do a diet alone, you're 20% likelihood alone with standard care to maintain the weight off. If you get social support, okay, if you get social support, it's 50% likely. If you get social support and a family member, it's like 75% likely that you'll maintain that weight off. The family and the support is
and
key.
Build a community.
Bingo.
That helps, and
exactly.
like people have been doing it forever. That's what we're seeing in our Zoom meetings, and we're trying to coordinate that with you, Tro, and your people. But
we're gonna do it.
That's really critical because you can see people who are just starting. They're frustrated. People go, "I was frustrated too. Here's what happened. Here's what I did. Now you're 80 pounds down." Right? Yep. You have to trust the process, and you have to be in because. And I agree with you, Tro, on that. I think it's very dangerous when people go, "It's non-sustainable." It's like, you know. Brian Wiley's sustained it for 10 years. You sustained it for all these years. All these people have sustained it. Like, what do you mean it's not sustainable? It's just like saying blood pressure medicine doesn't work if you don't take it. Yeah, of course. It doesn't work if you don't take it. The treadmill doesn't work if you're hanging your clothes on it. Trust me. If you got clothes hanging on your treadmill, take the clothes off and get on the treadmill. It's going to work a lot better that way.
Yeah. I 100% agree with you guys. And whenever I'm working with people, it's like the first couple of weeks is like, send me pictures of everything you eat and we're going to talk about it and learn. Education and self-improvement have to be part of the process, no matter what your diet. And where low carb is at a disadvantage is that there isn't that community in general society. And so little like media communities, be it Clubhouse or Twitter, need to pop up. And then they get a little bit like on their soapbox. I definitely admit it, but it's just, it is all I think any of us are clamoring for is provided as an option. Don't suppress it. Like, you just put it in the pool of options. Right now, it's not there. And one more question I want to ask you guys, and I think I'll know where you land, but throughout this whole thing, you get them using the term like restrictive diet. And any diet is going to require a degree of restriction. And if you want to choose what it is, I guess that's the flexitarian approach, then whatever. But I would argue that ketogenic diets for a lot of people are less restrictive than they are liberating, because in the environment where we are, it's unfair. It's like you're putting people who are, you know, insulin resistant in their brain, are driven to just eat and consume ultra processed foods, addicted. I think that's an appropriate term. You're putting them in that context.
And giving them food everywhere.
They're
going to fail.
And so when you put them on a diet that resets their metabolism in such a way that they are freed of those cravings, and we know this, like anybody who's dealt with people and coached people like one-on-one through a low carb diet knows, like those cravings diminish, and you're not tied to that. Like, I need the sugar. And then you can actually eat a little bit more intuitively with your body, where you're like, I didn't indulge in this big meal. Like, I had a big steak or I had too many eggs, and you're just full. And then you just like feast off body fast for a little while. If you're running on carbs, that's really, really difficult to achieve. If not
high foraging signal. If you look at the literature, it's there. The people who do best on the low carb diets are the ones who get a more stable blood sugar. Okay, ketonemia suppresses appetite. There is a unique effect to it. And if you talk to people who've gone on bariatric surgery, you ask them, they'll tell you 6 months to 1 year in, they're free of hunger because they were so insulin sensitive. They lost weight. Their blood sugars are stable. They can't right. And what they're describing is a stable blood sugar and ketones.
Yeah.
Right. They're describing metabolic syndrome being reversed. And that's it. We have to maintain people there. Nick, I can't agree with you more. And guys, I think we're running over. And maybe Brian will get some.
No, Tro, we got to grab a couple questions, man. It's 8:56. Do you? I mean, for me, it's 11:56. Yeah. I know you got to go.
I'm gonna have to go, but you guys can maybe keep going and do the questions. I'm gonna have to step out. Maybe you guys could take a stab at them. Yeah. Brian, do you know how to get them? You hit Q&A and then you just go straight through.
All right, man. We can grab a couple. We got Nick. We'll get rid of you, Tro, man. Hey, thanks,
right,
man.
He's smarter than me anyway. Look, he's smarter, younger, and he's got more hair, so he'll be able to take care of it, I'm sure.
Yeah, I got a nifty mitochondria t-shirt that just powers
all right, man. He's got it ready. So yeah, let's grab a couple questions. Patreon supporters, thanks. If you got to go, we understand. You can listen to the question and answer. We'll do like maybe 10 minutes, but yeah, to that point, that's the thing that Randy kept saying. Look, I was on this he was on a calorie restricted diet. It's totally different.
Yeah.
It's totally different than a
like
ketogenic.
1,200 calories per day.
If he was eating a 2,000
400 pounds,
calorie, I think he would have had the same results, and he'd be able to put muscle mass on and slowly do it. And that's my take on it too. If he would have called Tro, I think he'd have very good results because he was bought in, but he had great support. You know, David did a great job with him. And so, I think it's really, but he had to ultimately get insulin sensitive. And I think doing the weight bearing exercise, when he first lost his weight, he was doing all cardio, trying to run it off. Right. So that's a huge point of saying, look, muscle, because my patients, they're looking at the weight. And I go, look, if you put on 5 pounds of muscle, you should be happy about gaining 5 pounds because you put on 5 pounds of muscle. That's what's going to sustain you. And that's where we have a common ground. I think we have more common ground than just fighting over like semantics at some point is crazy, right?
What he did was incredible, and I'm so happy for him. The question that arises for me, and this is a question I asked myself after years of suffering with different metabolic diseases, is did I suffer more than is necessary? Why did I need to suffer so much to find this option? And I think a lot of people get disenchanted by conventional medicine because they aren't provided with the option. Then they have to become desperate to find the solution in the low carb option, which works for a lot of people. And it's just that, it providing it as an option. So really, I think Layne, you, me, and Tro, we're all flexible dieting, really. But a big part of that is having a low carb option, which isn't there.
Yeah, and I think that's it. And Layne's even saying, hey, we use it for some people, whoever it works for, and they kind of figured out. And I get his mindset. His mindset is, look, it's the same mindset against religion when they say, look, if you restrict kids too much, they're going to go crazy. And it's true. There are kids, if you're too strict when they're little, they get to the college and they have freedom and they taste it for the first time, they're going to be the ones drinking, having sex with everyone, doing all this crazy stuff. Other kids say, look, this is working for me. I want to keep my morality in. So I'm saying it's not one size fits all. Some people are going to react differently. And I think that's the key. It's the same thing with the moderation approach. The lady who wrote the book on alcoholic moderation killed the 2 people in a drunk driving accident, right? Because she couldn't moderate, but she thought she could. So yes, there are some people who are alcoholics I take care of, and their wife goes, look, you can have 1 drink a year or whatever. I'm moderating it, because the problem is people have 1 drink and then they want more and more and they lose that inhibition. When people go off the rails with me, it's if they're drinking, because then they go, forget it. It's Friday and I'm going to have my fun and I'm going to have pizza and beer. So, it's one of those things. And then they get back on track right because we see and go, what happened last night? Right. Mm-hmm. See, you don't let it go for a month.
I love your alcohol analogy, but another thing, I was in a clubhouse this morning, talk about like tips for success. And I always tell people to like know themselves, but when we were discussing, I kind of evolved it to like, learn about yourself. Everybody's going to respond differently. Like we all agree, but there are going to be points where regardless of what diet you're doing, even if you're trying to be restrictive with the ketogenic diet, you might fall off the horse. Use that as an opportunity to learn about yourself. Like, why did I do this? How did it affect me? And introspect so you can move along your nutrition journey. I mean, I always encourage people take a scientific approach to it. Every time you fall off the horse or every time you just change your diet in any way, it's an experiment. And whether those data are positive or negative, those are valuable data you can use to progress your model of who you are in your nutrition journey.
And you learn.
Progress.
And you learn from those things. You learn from your mistakes. You go, why did I have a donut yesterday? We just had that conversation with someone. She goes, everyone was doing it. And I felt like I should because I didn't want to stand out. Oh, then I have another lady. She's an ICU nurse. She's losing tons of weight. At first, she stopped over the holidays. She goes, I just can't do it during the holidays. Okay, cool. We'll see in January. I didn't think she'd show up. January, she shows up. Boom, she's crushing it. She's just absolutely crushing it. But I go, what are you doing now with the candy jar this next year? She goes, I didn't even look at it. I didn't even think about it anymore. It's not even a temptation. So when you start getting that mindset, she goes, I know what it does to my sugars. I know what it does to me. Seeing it on the continuous glucose monitor. When you see it yourself, you don't need me saying, hey, that doesn't seem good that you had corn last night and the corn made your sugar go to 200. You're like, okay, I'm not doing that again. People learn like mimosa or a margarita, you see what it does. You go, oh my gosh, I'm not doing that again. That wasn't good. A certain kind of protein bar and you go, oh, I thought that was healthy snack. Right. So let's grab a couple questions. Postmenopausal women face different challenges. Selection bias is right. Yeah. And I think of everyone I've struggled with weight loss, postmenopausal, stressed out female is really tough because you're dealing with hormones, you're dealing with stress hormones, you're dealing with changing, estrogen, progesterone levels that are going to make you go to more visceral fat, which makes insulin go up or vice versa also. But that makes you hungry and tired, fatigued. So it's hard to get motivated. So I find once someone gets on board, the big thing I'm finding, and to Layne's credit, I agree with him, putting on muscle mass helps these things.
I want to add to that though, just because I'm a neuroscientist and I'm always going to come at it from that angle. Again, metabolic benefits beyond the weight thing. So if you're interested in looking up a study, I think it was called something like midlife chronological and endocrinological transitions in the brain metabolism. It was a systems biology like basis for increased Alzheimer's risk. That was in the title, in the female brain. It was in Scientific Reports in 2020, in May, I think. And what they showed and what they described is a metabolic transition that goes on in women when they get older, where their brains in part become more dependent on ketones and less on glucose. And I thought this was really interesting. I read it in part when I was doing some papers on Alzheimer's disease, because women have a higher rate of Alzheimer's disease, and we don't really know why that is. They live a little longer, but that does not account for the whole effect. And Alzheimer's disease is just one of these diseases that's in the bubble of metabolic diseases. So it's very interesting, I think, to note that there is a shift in metabolism postmenopausally where you're probably less able to use glucose in the brain, in which context a low-carb diet would potentially help, even if you're not losing weight, which again, I think is downstream of metabolic health and is not a great proxy. There's like thin on the outside, fat on the inside people, but on the other side, there's metabolically healthy obese people, and it might not be super attractive to have a lot of subcutaneous fat, but it's possible that you're really healthy. I know you have patients like that.
Well, and you look at Randy. Randy was 500 pounds, and he was pre-diabetic, not diabetic. So it's not just being fat that you're diabetic. And we see people that are 160 pounds that have diabetes. So it's not the obesity that's a problem, right? It's where you're going to partition that energy. And when you can't store it anymore, if he would have got 508 pounds, maybe that would have been his tipping point for him, right? We don't know what his fasting insulin A1C were, but hugely it's going to change with weight loss by any stretch, but visceral fat is the key. I think that's what we're going to come back to. That's why I don't see any other way out. And again, someone said that this exposure therapy, we've done it our whole lives and we've all failed it. That's why we're obese, right? Because when you're around cookies and donuts and all that stuff, it's just and so many people, it's just a habit. We all know that. You sit there and say, oh, I'm watching TV or watching a movie, I'll have popcorn or I'll have peanuts, and you're not even mindfully thinking about it. You're just kind of doing it. And then there's other things about the dopamine, neuroplasticity.
And I think one of the big things to breaking a habit is reconfiguring your environment. I heard something along the lines of like, people who seem like they have a lot of willpower don't actually have a lot of willpower. They're just very good at configuring their environment so they don't have to exert the willpower. So if you're someone who's like kind of sugar driven, like you have cereal in the pantry, you're going to go for it at some point. Yeah. If you like change your environment so that you don't, then it becomes a lot easier. You just
and I think it's knowing where your addiction lies, right? For me, if you had 5 packs of cigarettes sitting on my desk right now, I'd have zero temptation to smoke it. It's just not my thing, right? But other people, or if there was a beer sitting here, I'm like, I'm not gonna drink it this early in the morning. But other people, that would be like they would be going crazy thinking about it. Or if there's a donut there, people just, it bothers them until they do it, right? Because
dude, if you take some Roquefort cheese and just like put it right here, I couldn't.
Yeah.
I could not nail it. But yeah, it's know yourself again. Be it nuts, which are low carb, high fat, or cheese or candy, whatever. Everybody has their own things.
Yeah. Was there anything else that really?
Well, somebody asked. I got David here asking, "What's the best way to measure muscle?"
Yeah, I was just reading the same.
Fat loss. I mean, I think the simplest way is waist circumference. Like take a string and then use that. That's pretty simple and a pretty good proxy for visceral fat. And if you're gaining weight and your waist circumference isn't going up, you're gaining muscle. That and performance. You can get
and
DEXA scan, but
I think it's going to be even more complicated. I have a Sika scale that we can look at body composition, and what's really interesting to me is I have people doing Ben's workout or doing weight bearing exercise, and initially their muscle mass goes down, even though they're working out and they're losing weight and everything's going the right way. And you go, why is there muscle mass? But it may be the volume of muscle that it's looking at. This bioimpedance may be bad. This is something I have to talk to the manufacturer about, because I think what is happening, people are changing their muscle tissue from like a ribeye steak to a fillet. Like you're cutting that marbling in the muscle. I think that's what's happening locally.
Well, you know me and you and Ben Bow have talked about this along with Ben Bickman about like just weird quirks in muscle quality and genetics. And we were talking with Ben on our Visceral Fat podcast about like how to design a program for me, because I'm one of the program I tend to gain muscle, and yet I can gain strength pretty easily. And I've done a lot of very interesting strength exercises. So when I was in high school, I set 2 state push-up records. My personal best was when I was 18, a senior in high school. I did 427 consecutive push-ups, military style cadence, like being monitored. And I'm tiny. Like you look at me, I'm small. I can put on strength, but I don't gain that muscle mass in the same way. And I think there's a lot of, everybody has those differences. And so I think what you're saying is spot on about impart muscle quality, not just the raw mass. And I just kind of imagine like I don't know why I imagine this, and this is completely like non-scientific, but like the James Cameron Avatar people, those like super skinny, like blue people, and yet they have like incredible strength. There was something in there about that, and I don't know why I'm going on that tangent, but
yeah, some people have that wiry strength. You see this small guy, that construction guy, picks up these big, huge logs. He's walking like, how the heck is he doing that? He doesn't have much muscle mass, but they have this dense muscle tissue. So there's different types of muscle tissue and all that, and how your body genetically is. Some people are sprinters, some people are long distance runners, and all that stuff. So. Yeah. So yeah, and I think anything else, Nick, that you saw that you go, that's you really wanted to comment on, because I know you're sharp in these areas.
In this whole discussion, a bunch of things came up, but where to go?
Well, pick one or two, man, so we can let people go home.
All right. Are there any other questions first? I'll let those go first. But
yeah, I think we pretty much went through them. I mean, a lot of them are comments, about Randy's journey and David and that kind of stuff.
One thing I would say that Randy said about restriction, he was making a comment. It was when he talked about the mammoth and restrictive dieting and putting ourselves back in an evolutionary context where we indulged when we could, and then kind of, we're content running off body fat, I guess, the rest of the time. Just in general, with respect to the evolutionary context argument, we can't put ourselves back in an evolutionary context. And I think this cuts both ways. So with respect to, say, carbohydrates, yeah, when we were evolving, we had some roots and tubers and stuff, maybe every now and then, but we were working for them. And the, fruits, say, we were eating were completely different. Like a banana was like the size of an apricot and it had big seeds. A watermelon was this big. And we were working for it, and it was kind of infrequent. We weren't having it multiple times a day. So that argument for me a little bit falls apart, especially when you add processed sugars to the mix and just surround people with it and have an unhealthy population. But I'll play devil's advocate against the low carb perspective, again, from a neurological point of view, and just use the case in point of there's this gene called ApoE4. And we talked about this on another podcast. It's something I'm very interested in. It's the main genetic risk factor for Alzheimer's disease. And peripherally, it does probably change how you manage, say, saturated fat. Now, what I think a lot of the low-carb community would say, and I hear this all the time, is that this ApoE4 gene, the allele, is the ancestral allele. And therefore, it's the oldest one in humans. It makes sense to eat a human diet. And when we were evolving, we maybe had a lot of saturated fat in our diet. Maybe not. But even let's just assume that we did. You can't apply that logic from that context to the modern day, because in the modern day, we have a different environment. We're not only living differently, but we have different priorities as a species. So whereas before, priority was make a lot of babies by the time you're, at your reproductive prime or past it. So evolution doesn't care quite as much. It cares, but not quite as much when you're not reproducing. Now, I honestly don't care about having 12 children. I'd like to have a few, but I don't want 12 per se. That's not my goal as an organism. As an individual, I prefer to live long with good cognitive health. That's just one case in point. But I wanted to bring it up because I think no matter what way you slice it, we do need to consider context. Our modern context being primarily metabolically unhealthy, primarily surrounded by processed sugars, and how that plays into the individual perspective. And I think that is something that we can all, again, agree upon, you, me, Tro, Layne, is that you do need to consider that context. I would just argue that the context now is biased a little bit in favor of a well-formulated low-carb diet. That makes it easier for most people to regain metabolic health. You can agree or disagree on that, but that's my perspective.
No, I agree. And I think, when you say, look, I'm a stress eater, cut the stress down. You don't have to eat it. You're not a stress eater anymore. So I think it's those kind of things. And looking at the sugar, pro-inflammatory state, all this stuff in the brain that we're seeing getting better on the low carb diet. This is why it's my bias, right? From a doctor, I'm not just looking at like someone losing weight and dying of a heart attack. You have to look at the whole big picture of diabetes. And we know diabetes are #1 killer because that's contributed to heart disease or insulin resistance, you could say, if I'm Ben Bickman. So I think all those things we're saying is like insulin sensitivity is what it's going to come down to. Can you do it through Layne's way? Apparently you can. right? So for some people, it's not going to work. Like some people are just like, if they cannot stand being low carb, if they hate meat, they hate vegetables and stuff like that, it's like, okay, you got to figure out what works for you. And I think that's when we talk about flexible dieting, that's what I mean. Some people, you have to live your life and it has to be something sustainable for you.
Yeah.
So if you hate it every day and you're miserable because you can't have certain foods, then you go, okay, why is it that I'm dependent on having these certain foods for my happiness?
Yeah.
Right.
And
I think there's a lot of psychological and physiological, all those kind of things play a role.
Paul Saladino, the guy that wrote the Carnivore Code, put it really nicely. And I'm not per se a carnivore, but his book was pretty good. If you haven't read it, I thought it made some good arguments. But he put it really nicely in the book, and he said something along the lines of like, know your quality of life equation. That's different for everybody, but in any given moment, you have to decide, is this best for my quality of life? And a lot of people who have had health challenges, like me or like Ryan, are probably going to always want to put health near the top. But that's not necessarily the case for everybody. So as long as you're aware, I believe in freedom of choice. I just believe in freedom of informed choice. And I think right now there's not a lot of information given. But you know,
and I think that's it.
Yeah,
what matters in life. Like, you know, I can't remember the exact number, but it was somewhere to the neighborhood of 90% of Olympic athletes were saying, yeah, if you can shoot me with something and I lose 10 years off the end of my life, but I could win the gold medal now, I'll do it.
That's
right?
That's their prerogative.
And if you want to have 6-pack abs or you want to have and I think that's the thing that Randy made that point. He got so obsessed with it that he lost balance in life, and that was his focus. And he was trying to lose more weight, starving himself and doing all this stuff. And he realized that was going to give him happiness. So that's why life's best medicine. I talk about that stuff. I say, what else matters? What else matters to you? Because you could have a well-formulated ketogenic diet, but be a miserable person and not be happy, right? So, you know, look at what's going to give you that joy, that peace, that comfort. So I think we end on that note, man.
Okay.
So Nick, thanks for joining me. We'll do this again.
Thanks for letting me in. You know, I just like I'm sitting there with a heart rate like at 150, just like wanting to say things. I always have.
No, I know, and I was very proud of Layne and Tro because I was not really a big fan of having this podcast, to be honest with you. Because if we can't find commonality and figure out what works and discuss it reasonably, then it's useless for people. But I think a lot of good came so people can think, I like the flexible diet. No, I like the ketogenic, or I like the low carb, or I just want to cut out processed foods as much as possible. It's like, what works for you? That's ultimately what it comes down to.
Start your journey. And
start your journey somewhere.
I agree with you. Yeah, I do get, one of the reasons I really wanted to get on here is because, and I'm sorry that Layne's not here to defend himself, but I thought he was kind of like unfairly picking on me on Twitter. And I'm just like, this is not productive. I don't want to fight you. If you want to fight, like, this is not the venue to do it. Don't ask me to explain all of metabolism in 280 characters. Like, it's not a fair.
Yeah, you can't do it.
He's really reasonable on these videos.
Yeah.
I don't like the. I love Twitter, actually. I get a lot from it, but it can be very frustrating at times when people try to get inflammatory. So
no, it is, and
I'm not good about shutting that out.
And part of that is by design because people like the inflammatory stuff. People are drawn to that, and so the street fighters get more followers. The simple guys like me don't get as many followers. You know, Tro gets more followers because people want to hear him go to war with people, and that's maybe a statement about our society to some degree, but also it's hard on Twitter when you can't make a point. That's when you get frustrated because you're like, I can't prove this point. It's like, but usually what I find, even in Layne's case, it's not Layne who was necessarily unreasonable with me. Most of the time, it was his followers who were unreasonable and thinking I had a presupposition that I didn't have. You know, so I think it's those kind of things where. Don't put word in people's mouth, listen to them in context, because had you listened to the podcast, you would know where I stand on these things. But it's hard when you come out of context and you're like, I don't like this guy, he's associated with all those guys. I don't like him as by association type thing.
It's difficult to know how to evaluate individuals because you're right. You have to play the game at some level. I recently wrote my first book and I realized how much you do kind of have to play the game. And to Layne's credit, like I think he has like our followers combined times 5. Like he evidently knows how to play the game, and if he needs to be a little inflammatory to do that, and in the end he thinks he's doing like a means to an end thing, then I'll give him that credit. I guess I just need to.
Yeah, well, and I would say, look, if I have to be inflammatory to get you to follow me, then unfollow me. That's okay, because I'm not going to be inflammatory. I'm going to try to say, how do I learn from Layne? He's obviously having success, or he wouldn't be in business. He wouldn't be doing what he's doing. He wouldn't have the followers he has. So.
That's true.
You have to learn, like people have it. Maybe it's his motivation. Maybe it's that he's in their corner and people have someone that cares about him and say, look, we can do this. Maybe he just has great people working for him. I don't know the story, but the guy's doing well. So that's why I like to have people like that we could all say, okay, what do I learn from you? Because we have to take something out of this. Everyone we meet, we have to take something that you may not like the person, but you go, I like this and I like this. Let me see if I can mold that in, because he has an app that's helping people clearly. He's got coaches who are in their corner and people like David. So I think that's really important, that we have to look and say, look, if it's working, maybe I adopt something you're doing that's working. Maybe I wouldn't do it the way you're doing it, but respectfully having that disagreement. Twitter is just hard because it's such a short thing. But for me, it's like, I'm not gonna argue with you on Twitter. It's just not the thing. So everyone, thanks for sticking with us. I know we went long. I got a patient I got to see. I'm gonna get yelled at. So Nick, man, we always will ramble forever. So
I know.
We'll have you back on, man. Appreciate you joining us. And everyone, thank you. And I'll see you tonight. I got to talk to these kids from Harvard. So I get it.
Yeah, we got Brian on tonight. I'm excited
to brainwash them. So thanks for the invitation, man. So everyone, Patreon supporters, patients, everyone out there, thank you for supporting us. I know we went long. That was by design, because it's hard to hash these things out, because I think it's important to hear all aspects. And so hopefully it changed your point of view either on us or on Layne and our approaches. But I think ultimately we all want our clients or patients to be successful, and that's what it comes down, is you and figuring yourself out. So we're just kind of helping, coaching along those things. So thank you for sticking with us. Thanks for your support. We greatly appreciate it.
Thanks, Brian and Tro and Layne, even though they left.